For me to grab another beer.
Grab another Bills. There you
I
go.
don't have to get up.
That's the one. Yeah, we've done that too. Then we had to start again. I was like, oh, unprofesh. But all good. That's all good. Technology, eh? It's
But you know when those mistakes happen, like you just gotta keep on going there. Show must go on. And stuff.
that's the key, brother.
Yeah.
Just keep on moving, like Dory says. So no, that's the way. That's the way. Keep on swimming.
We had Dominic on he was the actor for Shortland Street,
Oh wow. Yeah.
and we had half an hour of conversation, and then
Okay.
the computer shut down,
Oh no. Okay.
and we lost that gold of
Oh, good lord.
sort of like half an hour of us just shooting the shit, and
Yeah.
but man, it was good. It was
Yeah.
good cover. You know, you can't repeat it, eh? So
No.
you just gotta keep going.
It's very hard to replicate.
Hoping-
Sort of. Yeah.
Hoping that it'll produce that gold again, but you know,
Oh, good lord. It's a shame Pat's not here because he's normally the gold bringer for us. But no, definitely. I think any conversation is good conversation where you can engage with someone like yourself, or even someone that's a bit different,
Yep.
and sort of learn a few things. And I guess that's the other thing with podcasting these days. It's not even so much, sometimes it's not the person you speak to, but it's also the people that are watching or listening. They might pick something up that's useful, and you know, you can plant a seed in someone's life, and you know, they can learn something, which is what we all want to do anyway. We're always learning. So
yeah.
that's the way. Yeah.
So I think I saw your first episode was you guys started last year, end of last year.
Yeah, so just after the All Blacks lost to England.
Oh,
Painful memories for some people maybe, but that was a good game.
Yeah.
But Patrick asked me, "Oh, bro, we should do a podcast." I'm like, "Yeah, sweet as." I mean, I did a podcast before that.
Oh yeah. Was it your own one?
Yeah. So what? So previous when I came back to New Zealand in 2019, March about 2019, my dad lost his leg to diabetes. So I decided to come back and basically help him with his recovery. Before that, I was in Hong Kong for about 6-7 years.
Okay.
And probably the last 2 years I was there, I did a podcast called League 852. So it was a rugby league podcast. 852 is like the area code for Hong Kong. And so, yep, rugby league podcast. So we sort of try to model on like the Footy Show, if you're a fan of the Footy Show with Fatty and Steelo and all those fellas.
Yeah.
And that was quite fun. And then I guess that's where we sort of discovered we never like shot video or anything like that. It was basically, you know, we had a couple of phones with decent microphones.
Yeah.
And my friend at the time, my friend Neville Metcalf, who was also like the head of Hong Kong Rugby League, would go to his office. He's a lawyer. So during his lunch break, would basically pop down, and a bit like here with all our food here, you know, there'd be some char siu bao and that sort of stuff, and we would sort of eat and talk about rugby league. And I think what I found with that podcast is that, yeah, rugby league, we all like rugby league because it's a great sport and that sort of stuff. But at the same time, we could sort of bring in different types of content. So, you know, we looked at current events, and I went away and did interviews off-site with other people, and then just edited them into the podcast. So it almost became, quite, like I said, I'd probably say kind of like the Footy Show, just not as funny, because those guys are pretty hilarious, right? So I guess that was sort of my introduction into podcasting. And then I'd obviously discovered Anchor. And I know you guys use Anchor as well, and to everyone out there in Anchor world, keep on listening and keep on supporting, because it's very important. I do like with Anchor that they now offer sponsorship for certain ads. Have you guys looked into that?
Yeah, I looked into it. They said it's America only, US only.
Yeah,
So
that is one thing.
Did you send an email? Because they've got that thing on the website saying send an email if you want any
if you want
questions.
it. I was like, oh yeah. I think, oh no, obviously we're not in America. I have heard. Have you heard? There's a rugby podcast with Jim Hamilton and Andy Goon, and there's and one of the local is a Kiwi guy, and they do a podcast. Obviously, Andy and Jim Hamilton, they're over in the UK, and Andy, I think the other guy, sorry, can't forget his name. Sorry, bro. He's based here in New Zealand, and so they obviously do their Zoom sessions, and then they sort of record it. But that's a podcast, I think, actually based here in New Zealand. I think because of the size of the audience, so they've obviously got quite a few subscribers or listeners. So they actually chuck in local ads. So that's what I mean. It was like advertising Spark and sort of some local programs and all that sort of stuff. So I guess hopefully, I mean, like you said, it's America that sort of has the sponsorship or sponsored ads, because obviously for us, I mean, like yourself, I mean, you're obviously investing a lot of money and time and to share information out there. But I guess to monetize it is kind of the goal, right? It's something you guys want to do, or at least have a bit of coin coming in.
Yeah, that's it is the end goal. I mean, who would want to do this for a full-time job? You know, like talk to people and you know learn.
Yeah.
Because that's the main things why we do this podcast, to learn off other people.
Absolutely. Yep.
And not just any other people, our own people, because there's a lot of, like I hear you guys say on your podcast, there's a lot of good stories out there, and it's good to promote those stories.
Yeah.
Especially from our own people. So
yeah.
No, that's good. That's a good thing.
There's definitely plenty of stories to be shared, inspirational stories. I know, I guess if Patrick was here, he'd probably tell you about, he used to do these inspirational interviews, and like 5-minute interviews, and you basically go and talk to different people in the community, firemen, policemen, different jobs, or just people out there making a difference in the community. And I guess that's sort of where our podcast sort of evolved from as well. And that, again, I had a bit of experience doing a podcast, putting it together, knowing how to use Anchor, and then with his background in terms of having done those interviews and video format, so he'd post them on Direct Productions on his Facebook page, he sort of wanted to evolve that into a longer conversation, like we're doing now, because it's nice to definitely hear people's stories, and I guess get it in that interview format, but at the same time, when you converse or when you speak to people, it's nice to be able to sort of a bit of give and take. And then you can sort of ask questions on the fly. I mean, we don't script anything like you fellas. We just sit down and have a bit of a chat, right? And then that way, we might, like you said, sort of get those little nuggets that come out, and then someone out there listening, or even especially ourselves, sort of learn something. So it's quite cool how that sort of process evolves. But I mean, for you guys, I mean, Where's Network? I mean, I saw your guys work probably earlier in the year, especially during the lockdown, and I thought, wow. I mean, there are strength in numbers. There's definitely strength in numbers. And so when you have, 13 odd podcasts pulled together, you can cover so much content, which is awesome. And I know you guys were on, you had Seal Manatafa, Alex McCarthy on, and, he's a one-man band. He's a one-man show, Mr. New FM. I remember that voice, right? So, I mean, it's nice that you can have all these different shows and podcasts, but we can collaborate together, because we will be able to share audiences, or like if you can say that, we can share stories, we can share content. And I guess when it does come to content creation, or I guess more of a social media sort of term, you can basically choose to collaborate with people, come up with your own fresh content, or like most people, copy bits and pieces from all different places. But I mean, I know that you guys, you got started sort of listening to JRE, right? The old Joe Rogan Experience. Who was the first guest that you sort of remember watching?
I can't actually remember. I remember when Jamie Foxx come on, because that was the one first time I listened to it like more than once.
Yeah.
Because I like those stories that he was telling about his
parties.
There,
Kanye in the corner and Jay-Z in the corner.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But since then, I think JRE's been the standard for podcasts for me anyway. Yeah. I know this podcast is heavily influenced by JRE.
Well, we've got our own sort of 135 experience, brother. That's the play. I like the sensory deprivation tank over there, bro. That's pretty cool. Yeah, little man cave, so it's cool.
But it was mainly my co-host, Isaiah. He was into podcasts for years.
Oh,
and
sure.
He was one of the first guys I remember trying to get everyone into podcasts. And this was back in like 2011, 2012.
Yeah.
And that's real early, yeah. So he was listening to Joe Rogan when it was in
they first sort of started.
In the hundreds, not hundreds, yeah. In the 3 digits.
Red Band and all those fellas, right?
Red Band.
He probably will listen to like, do you know who Adam Curry is? Adam Curry? Yeah. So he's the godfather of podcasting, right? So I think, he's probably be listening to him. And there is a good, I actually, to be honest, I hadn't really heard of him until I listened to, I found a podcast called Mo Facts with Adam Curry. Have you heard of that podcast?
No.
Mo Facts with Adam Curry, it's basically him and an African-American gentleman by the name of Mo Facts. And they basically sit down and, have their podcast. I'd really encourage people to listen to that one and check it out, because they talk about sort of obviously racism and all that, and we can get into that tonight as well, but in America and the history of African-American people and all that sort of stuff. But what I like about that podcast is, a bit like Malcolm X said all those years ago when he was before he went, is that in order for people to get along, you basically need both parties to sit down together and not be afraid to offend each other and have that conversation and then find common ground. So you need a white person and a black person to basically sit down and say stuff. And as long as they don't offend each other and they can sort of meet each other halfway, that's kind of how you can solve racism. And so I thought, that's a pretty powerful way, and that's what basically the show is. And I think it's, again, with Adam's experience and the content that Mo brings to the show, he brings a lot more. He brings different perspectives on sort of African American history. And obviously what's happening in America right now is dominating all that sort of stuff. So I find that a lot of my understandings and perspectives are sort of shaped by people like that. But like you said, I would rather listen to an actual African American person talk about African American issues and topics and all that sort of stuff and get their perspectives. Now, that's not going to be the same for all African Americans. I mean, I have a lot of American friends. They're on both sides, left and right. Some of them are Republicans, some of them are Democrats. Some think Trump did a great job. Some people don't want him out. So we'll see what happens with these recounts. But I think, again, important to have when you want to, again, form an opinion on something, if you can get people that are directly inside whatever it is that you want to find out more about, those are the people to go to as opposed to other people. So what do you reckon? I mean, is that a...
Yeah, I think that, in USA there is a big problem. Yeah, and I'm cautious that their problems make their way here through social media and all that.
Yeah, for sure.
But my question is, what does it do for us? Does it help us see that there is racism here, which there is?
Oh, there's racism everywhere. Yeah, there's plenty of racism everywhere.
But are we talking about levels of racism here? Are we as bad as the United States? Are we as polarizing as them?
Yeah.
And if we get that sort of information from the news, from social media, would it make us polarized too? Yeah. When those polarizing ideals come through social media, and that comes to us.
Yeah.
Then we end up doing those protests down on Queen Street.
Wow. Yeah.
And are we shining a light on something that probably needs to be shined on, but to that extent of how bad it is? It's bad, but is it as bad?
Maybe slightly different experiences. I guess if you're going to make that comparison, for example, Aotearoa New Zealand, America, different histories, different ways that the countries have developed. In New Zealand, we obviously had the Treaty of Waitangi, which basically allowed us to form this country. And obviously, because of mistranslation within the treaty, obviously a lot of Māori, went through a lot of deprivation because of that. And that's when they talk about the effects of colonisation. I guess if you were to compare that to, say, America, you've obviously got Africans that were brought over on slave ships, around 1619 or whenever it was. And obviously they went through a different process of deprivation in terms of going through, 250 years of slavery, probably another 100 years of sort of Jim Crow laws and racism and all that sort of stuff. To get to a point now where the comparison, what's interesting to me, is the comparison and the discussion around reparations. So in America, and I was talking to a good friend about this, and they're saying, there are plenty of African Americans that support this idea of getting reparations if they can trace their lineage back to African slaves that were brought over. Here in New Zealand, we had the Waitangi Tribunal, right, and the treaty settlements, and like our whānau. Our whānau from up north, and so the treaty settlements, my understanding is that there's been about $900 million that has been paid in the settlement, the Waitangi settlements, to different iwis, Ngāi Tahu, Sea Lord, all that sort of stuff. Whereas, I guess, in one way, we're kind of ahead of the curve, or ahead of America in that regard, in that the government, or the Crown, because that's what they'll know and have, has made sort of that already made that step towards addressing all that discrimination or racial discrimination or the effects of colonisation. Whereas in America, African Americans, they're still bottom of the heap, and then they're still trying to bring up this idea of reparations where, as a way of helping them to get out of poverty, to get out of the bottom of American society. What I do find interesting, though, with that is obviously in America during the 1960s, they had LBJ, Lyndon Johnson, who was the president. That's when they started the war on poverty, right? That's when they started putting trillions of dollars into the war of fighting poverty. Well, 60s was a long time ago. Has any of that changed? not really. I mean, Americans are still at the bottom, right? African Americans are still at the bottom. So, and that's why you see people that are asking for reparations, that are saying, we've suffered, we should be paid for what happened to us or what happened to our ancestors. Because that put us, I guess, behind the eight ball, or put us further back. And only now we're starting to catch up. But I actually think what happened more in the 60s is what sort of kept African Americans sort of, again, down in the dumps. The comparison between Māori and African Americans, similar population percentages in terms of the overall population of each country, right? So you can always sort of see there's a bit of a parallel there. But again, I think in New Zealand, in our case, we're a little bit more ahead in terms of addressing that inequality. Does that make sense? Yeah. So I guess, a lot of people sort of draw. And then where do Pacific Islanders come into that? We're our Samoan and Tongan and our Cook Island and Fijian and Niuean, people that came from the 50s onward and started filling those labour shortages. And then obviously when Muldoon and that said, we're good now, you've filled the shortage, you can bugger off back to the islands. Well, no, we've set up families here, people have born here, generations have come forth. It gets tricky there. Because it's not so much. It's the groups, and because we're part of those groups, and I guess that's where the sort of our podcast has come about as well. It's talking about those sorts of issues that maybe people aren't as familiar with. But what do you think? I mean, is that for Pacific Islanders and Māori especially? We're always at the bottom of those socioeconomic groups. We're at the bottom, trying to claw our way up.
Yeah, I think so. In here in New Zealand. I'm actually in the middle of reading Alan Duff's new book, A Conversation with New Zealand, and he talks about how if you look at Indigenous all around the world, Māori has the best out of everyone in terms of what you're saying about the reparations, and he talks about
settlements, sure.
And he talks about ownership of homes and personal property and even careers,
Yes.
In terms of that. So if you compare that to the Aborigines in Australia, it's like...
Yeah. It was cool to see them at least get their national anthem sung in one of the Aboriginal languages when the Wallabies played Argentina. But that's interesting with Alan Duff.
And I also know what you're saying about when you're talking about Lyndon B. Johnson and the war on poverty, because even though they threw a whole lot of money at it, the white people weren't letting them buy homes.
Well, the redlining, right?
Yeah.
That was the big thing, especially after World War II, where you had African Americans go and fight for their country, and then when they came back to try and get loans to basically buy nice properties, they were getting turned down, right? That's where the red line or fence off particular areas, and that forced them all into the slums. So it's like, okay, well, there's a direct example of a very racist policy that basically resulted in what we see today, inner city slums, in the ghetto, the projects, or whatever you want to call them.
Yeah.
But it also highlights the importance of property ownership. Having assets. If you're paying rent these days, it's money down the drain as opposed to being able to either pay off a mortgage or own property. that's how people seem to accumulate wealth. And the more assets that you can acquire, probably the better. But again, if you've started sort of back here, you've grown up in a deprived area or whatever it is, and buying a first home, it's hard enough for anyone to really buy a first home these days. Auckland's super expensive. Yeah. It's crazy. So
it's funny you put that up, because I just got reminded of a generational wealth.
Oh yes.
Because if the first Pacific Islanders came from Samoa to New Zealand in the 60s, 70s, we started from scratch. So we all started in the same starting line.
So on the same line,
So it's up to the next generation to improve on that, and then improve on that for the next generation.
Constantly
whether the Palangis have been doing that for generations already, so they're already ahead. So I think if we understand that, then we probably know we can do better.
Yeah.
Especially me and my generation. My mum and dad came from Samoa. They settled in town in Greyland, and so everyone there started from scratch. And it's cool. It's interesting to me, our podcast, because all these Pacific Islanders we had on, and they've been successful in their careers. And I'm thinking, man, how'd you get how'd you get there? How'd you get there? Like,
Yeah, sure.
so we have these talks of all these different people, right? And I'm thinking, wait, we all started from the same place. We all started from scratch. If they're the same generation, you know, our parents all started from zero. So to me, I'm like thinking, okay, if I think I haven't done much in my life, then I've got no excuse.
Yeah, that's definitely a good way to put it. You know, they the previous generations basically got us to the ladder, and now it's up to us to climb the ladder, and then our kids will climb top of our shoulders and they'll climb even higher, or they'll create their own ladder. Yeah, and I guess that's the other thing. You know, when you start moving into different spaces, whether it's digital or whether it's a brick and mortar business or whatever it is you do in life, you know, if you're not happy with a door, or you're trying to get through a door and there's too many other people there, well, create your own door. You know, whatever that is for you. So it's but that is the interesting thing about, you know, again, when those previous generations, they all settled in Grey Lynn, and then they all sort of started migrating out into the different suburbs, right, coming out west and going out south. And then we had Dr. Melania Nai on, who obviously had a lot to do with the Polynesian Panthers, and she sort of talked about what it was like to go up in Grey Lynn and be part of that movement, and how she went to America and you know, went to the actual Black Panthers themselves and sort of obviously adopted their philosophy to again, and that's where you see the parallel between, I guess, Pacific Island and Māori and African Americans, which is why maybe that's why we can sort of relate to them so much, just like our Aboriginals or any sort of Indigenous people. But again, it's sort of, Grey Lynn's a bit more different now than when it was probably when our previous generations came. But then at the same time, you've got people that have come from all over the world now and that have settled in. And that's the nice thing about living in Auckland. Very multicultural. Yeah, very multicultural. You get people, I'd say a lot more Saffas these days. Have you noticed? There's a few more Saffas that come in. Lovely people as well. So, lovely people. I can't say I've never met a Saffa that I don't like. They love their rugby and they like their braais. They like their barbecues just like us. But yeah, very nice people. So yeah.
You just reminded me when you said Auckland's it's multicultural, because I heard you on episode 1 of your podcast. Oh, yeah. You were listening to a lot of Stefan Molyneux.
Yes, yeah, it's Stefan.
And you know when that guy came over and he got cancelled, him and Lauren Southern.
Yeah, they did. Right. Yeah, they got absolutely chopped down, didn't they?
And it was all about the comments about a multicultural society, like they don't agree with it.
Yeah, I guess for them coming from America, I think Lauren's from America, and obviously Stefan is in Canada, they don't have maybe the same level of multiculturalism that we do. And again, that's probably an advantage or a strength for us. I mean, I went to Mount Roskill Grammar last century. Oh, that's a long time ago. And I remember in our school hall, we had, I want to say, 53 different flags. So all the different nations, where all the different people were from, we had a flag for each of them. And I remember even during the 90s when you had a lot of Somalian refugees coming over and, you know, people, but again, just people from different backgrounds. It was just normal, I guess, you know, now maybe for the previous generation, or maybe they're just sort of, for Māori and Pasifika, they've just sort of grown up around each other, Māori and Pasifika, and Pākehā as well. But for me, growing up in Mount Roskill mid-90s to late 90s, that school was so multicultural that, you know, you got to see people from different ethnic groups. What is interesting, though, is when you do have lots of different groups, sometimes your own cultural identity can disappear. So you can become assimilated into a generic Kiwi culture, which can have its problems. You know, I mean, we, as I said, mum's Māori, dad's Samoan. We grew up listening or hearing Samoan and, you know, being told to do for hours and we knew what they were saying. But in terms of speaking, it was kind of a different story. I mean, how was it for you sort of growing up? Did you speak as well, or were you taught?
Well, we went to Samoan church, but that was the only Samoan we heard in church. I mean, at home, mum and dad, they didn't talk to us in Samoan, they talked to us in English. Oh, right. But only when we got in trouble. So
yeah, of course.
There's normal.
And I guess, I know for a lot of Māori, for example, the previous generations, they weren't allowed to speak Māori. So it was really discouraged, and that's where the sort of the loss of the language came about. And then obviously you saw a resurgence back in the 80s with Koanga Reo, and now, I mean, it's, you know, it's Māori TV and all the different mechanisms for basically acquiring the language. That is echoed in Pacific language as well, because obviously a lot of like our parents or even previous generations, I guess discouraged is the right word, or didn't speak because they wanted them to speak, the mother tongue or the main language of this country. So they didn't want you to be disadvantaged, I guess, is one way you could say. I mean, I remember my dad telling me that. I was like, mate, you should have spoke to us in Samoan. Here I am later in my later years, it probably wasn't until my mid-20s I actually started learning to speak. I went to university to learn it. That was one of my subjects at Auckland Uni. So, to be able to... And there was a whole bunch of us. New Zealand-born Samoans couldn't speak. And we had Vavao Fetoi, who taught us. And he was amazing. We happened to go to church with him as well, which helped. But it was nice to learn the language, learn how to write it, and then be able to speak it. And I guess the stigma of not being able to... Sorry, that probably brings up, I think, the questions of identity. Are you Samoan if you can't speak? Are you? What do you reckon?
Yeah. I think so.
Of course you are, right? Yeah. Just because you don't speak, if that same blood that runs through your veins runs through your parents' veins, and you can trace it all the way back to your villages in Samoa and even further, then hell yeah, you're Samoan. I guess it's just, again, whether you're a Samoan born in New Zealand born Samoan, or you're born in Samoa, you're born in America, born in Australia, I think we're going to see a lot more, you're seeing a lot more Samoans, Pacific Islanders born in Europe, Africa, Asia, all these other parts around the world, but we're all Samoan at the end of the day. There's the Anganu'u, which brings us all together, and when you get that opportunity to learn and speak, it's very important. So,
with our people spreading out like that, and if you think about maybe 5 generations from now, what do you think the landscape is going to be in terms of our culture? I mean, will we be so merged in those countries we settled in that we won't have, it'll be so mixed that we can't even recognize? Or is it going to be a case where our kids will go back to Samoan and not recognize anything?
I think you're seeing, I guess if you look at the way it is now, so Wha Samoa in New Zealand is different to Wha Samoa in Samoa. There's alterations. Just like in Australia, just like everywhere else. What I see as encouraging is people like Tanuai, who does the Taui Tour program, the Anganu'u Wha Samoa 101, which used to run in, helping wherever you are, and that was the beauty about the program going online as well. Lockdowns definitely had its problems, but that was one of the good things about Tanuai putting that program online. So it doesn't matter where you are in the world, you can tune in on Zoom and basically learn the Anganu'u. And I think as long as you have people like that, and that sort of ministry for him and Kisa, that will always keep some sort of commonality, but it will evolve and change. I think you're right. In 5 generations' time, it'll be a combination of whatever New Zealand culture is and Samoan culture. Whatever it is in Australia, there'll be still the common links that we have. There'll be still the same mesina and all that sort of stuff that we'll treasure, especially the language, but it will change. And that's why it's important to sit down and have conversation. And that's what Tanuai encourages, They go and sit down with the makais in your family and, learn those whaalupingas and learn all those different laungas that you might will need to give, because when they're gone, they're gone. I mean, you've got people like him who are saving it and putting it online, but you still need to learn it from your own ainga. You can learn the basic stuff, but you've got to sit down with your own, if you want to hold on to the culture. I mean, for Māori, I guess when I look at sort of my Māori side compared to my Samoan side, we used to live up north on the farm in our marae, and would go back there and do all that sort of stuff.
It's easy access.
Yeah, easy access. Yeah, easy access, and you're on the marae and you're there for tangihanga and you're on the kitchen, all that sort of stuff. I mean, definitely my sister, it's interesting because my sister's probably a lot more immersed in te ao Māori, and I'm probably a lot more immersed in Wha Samoa. And that's just because I've been here. She lived up north for a bit as well, and all that sort of stuff. So, but they're both very important to hold on to, because you need to hold on to those aspects of our culture and your identity, so your kids have something as well. Because when they don't, then they start having problems, and they can go off the rails and all that sort of stuff. So,
yeah. So all that stuff is important, like the Anganu'u, what they're doing and all that. So. Yeah, man, I just just needs to stretch it out a bit, a few generations down. So it'll be interesting to see. Like when we're old, with our grandkids running around, it'll be interesting to see what the landscape is of our culture, especially here in New Zealand. You talked about like mixing in with the Kiwi culture. Like, do you think like that will manifest into something in the future, like a Kiwi, a real Kiwi sort of? Because right now, if we say Kiwi culture, it's just the stereotype stuff, right, on TV. Like
everyone plays rugby, likes rugby, and all that sort of stuff. Yeah.
But if you consider like the Indians are here, the Chinese, as well as Pacific Islanders, you know, South Africans, like
you sort of.
Are we gonna
pick and choose?
Go into something else?
I guess time will tell, but I mean, it would. I wouldn't be surprised if it does sort of change. Things like that will change over time because of the influence of other cultures, and again, as long as people sort of hold true to the basic parts of their culture, they'll be able, and they continue to do those practices. You know, do si'is and sautangas and all that sort of stuff. Then they'll always be a part of it. But as soon as people stop using them inside a family, inside a nainga, or you don't go back to Samoa and see it alive and all that sort of stuff, or you don't get, you know, a be'a and all that sort of stuff, then it'll start to disappear and it will be replaced by something else. Because people are always looking for a sense of belonging, and obviously most people will find that in terms of their culture. You know, the work that my sister and I do, we write Section 27 reports. Have you ever heard of those?
No.
So we basically work with offenders. And Section 27 reports, they're also called cultural reports. That's a little bit problematic because it's not just about culture. Section 27 reports are based on the 2002 Sentencing Act, which enables any offender to have a cultural speaker, which we think actually should be their family, or a cultural report written for them to help a judge come up with their final sentence. Does that make sense? So it's basically...
Like a translator.
Not so much a translator, but someone who was, and like for me, like I spend my days basically either at Mount Eden Prison or Parry or in court or video chatting with offenders. And we sit down and basically the way that the legislation is written is that they're looking for areas of deprivation. Those three areas are social, economic and cultural. So by social deprivation, if you think about, say someone, and we've gotten a few of these, especially during lockdown, say someone's beaten up their missus. Social deprivation that might be in their past or in their upbringing is that they saw their dad beat up their mum, so domestic violence. So that's a type of social deprivation. Say someone gets done for stealing. You know, they went and stole something and didn't pay for it. Again, if they were brought up in a family environment where, you know, they were having to steal to put food on the table or climb the table, that's an example of economic deprivation. I guess where the cultural stuff sort of comes into it is, do these offenders and I just work with the men, my sister works with the ladies, were they deprived of culture? So did they grow up, for example, learning Samoan, or did they grow up learning Te Reo? Did they spend time on their marae? So by having a look at sort of those three areas, is there a causal link, or is there basically a link between what happened to them as kids that could help explain their offending now? And you can imagine if you grew up, and this is the big thing that I've picked up from it, is that the men that I've sat down with or going to see in prison, most of them will come from a fatherless home or a broken home. Most of them would have seen domestic violence. They would have been exposed to drugs and alcohol from a very young age. I'm talking 5, 6, quite easily. A lot of them were physically abused, sexually abused, and those can manifest in different ways. And that's not to say that if you were sexually abused, that you will go and sexually abuse other people, but that anger can manifest in other ways and basically force someone to do, from what I've seen, more violent crimes. Gang culture. I mean, our whānau, our Māori side, you know, we have gang connections, and that's maybe why sort of the offenders are a bit more at ease with us. We know what gang culture is and to be a gang family as well. And again, if you take someone, and it's a bit like how we talked about before, sort of going back to sort of the deprivation that our ancestors or sort of suffered and all that sort of stuff. There's even more factors now that can sort of send someone the wrong way. And one of them is culture. Like I will say, a lot of the people that I've sat down with, if they didn't have a strong sense of their own culture, then they found that culture, they would find that culture, that identity in gang culture or drug culture or crime. Because I mean, culture is just a form of doing something, right? So it didn't have to. Yeah, that's probably been the biggest thing for us in sort of doing this work over the last year and a bit, is that there are definitely things in someone's past that can help explain. Now, the reason why these reports are written as well is because there's actually a discount that's on offer with these reports. So basically, if you get in trouble, you go to a sentencing indication and the judge said, well, you've done this particular crime, you're going to get this number of years. If you put in an early guilty plea, that's 25% off straight away. If you do restorative justice, that's another X percentage off. These cultural reports, my sister and I, the reports we've written, not to sound like a dick or anything, but our reports have never not gotten a discount. And sort of that discounts range sort of between 10 to say 35%. So if you think about it, if someone...
Is that a cultural discount?
Yeah, basically for doing the Section 27 report.
What?
Yeah. So and the reason why lawyers will engage in it is that you might have someone that's facing X number of years. If you get your sentence under 2 years of imprisonment, and depending on how much time you've served in remand and that sort of stuff, you can get a non-custodial sentence, as in you don't go into prison, or you won't go back into prison, because some of these guys are repeat offenders. Now that, funnily enough, is one of the big criticisms of the report, because essentially you're giving these different avenues or discounts for offenders to get less jail time, or even be released back into the community or be placed on home detention. But again, at the end of the day, the way that the legislation is written is that everyone has has access to that. I mean, we don't just work with Māori and Pasifika. I've written reports for Asians, Africans, Middle Eastern people, and obviously I found the Africans, Middle Eastern people, and Asians especially, they're more migrants that have come over here, and a bit like our previous generations, they came here and they had to adjust to being in a new country, not speaking the language. They'll get on the drink, and then they'll have drink driving charges, all that sort of stuff.
So what does that fall under? That particular thing, the immigration one, what you just described.
Yeah, so that's probably a form of cultural deprivation, and that you're having to adapt to a different culture. I mean, I know what it's like to live overseas. Footy's taken me sort of all around the world, and yes, mainly predominantly Western countries, but I know what it's like to live around Asia and all that sort of stuff as well. And the way that people adapt into a new environment or a new society or a different culture, some of them grasp it with two hands and just run with it. Other people, if you can't speak if we moved to a country where English wasn't the main language, we couldn't speak the language, and we found it hard to get work, we might resort to having a few too many beers to deal with that sort of anxiety and depression. So I found, again, whether it's Māori and Pacific or our other immigrants that have come over from different countries, there is an avenue there for help to be offered in terms of these reports. But the other thing with what we do with our reports, it's not just about getting people off, if that makes sense. It's not about getting them time off or discount. It's actually sitting down with them and saying, are you really remorseful? Or are you just saying this so you can get a discount so you can end up in prison in bloody 6 months' time? I've found the people that, the men that have kids on the outside, whether they're like young kids or older kids, they're the ones that seem to be a lot more open to changing. Some of them, no remorse. So I'm like, well, bro, you ain't going to get much of a discount. It's not going to be enough. You're probably going to end up inside. So it's also about being real with people as well. Just because, you're Māori or Pacific and we can write these reports, if you're not remorseful, if you're not willing to make the changes, if you're not going to do the courses that they recommend, you're going to have a problem. You're going to end up going back into jail. A lot of them want to, because that's their safe place, right?
Yeah.
They're used to the wars. They're used to the schedule. They come out into the world and it's like, oh, there's no one to bring my meals. There's no one to sort of, keep me safe. And that's something else that I've sort of learned over our time doing this, because it's like, some people do want to be in jail because it's safer for them. Because out here in the real world, you have all this responsibility. It's not as easy for some people. And if they're part of a gang as well inside, it's almost a holiday for them, or it's a badge of honour. So it's been an interesting sort of journey to go on that with my sister, especially given her background as a lawyer, and then moving into writing these reports. But like I said, it's you go to the sentencing and you sit with their families, and and the hardest ones are where there are people that didn't quite realize that, you're going to go to jail if you commit this particular crime, and it doesn't matter if you have a report or your early guilty plea, it's not going to be enough for you to go home with your family. And when they get taken off to jail and you see their kids crying and their families crying, their parents crying, it's like that's maybe when it sort of sinks in, and then they realize, oh, hang on, no, this is real life. I'm going into prison now, so yeah, crazy.
I always thought it was poverty. That was the main factor towards crime and what's happening. You see there was the economic deprivation.
I think that can come under economic deprivation.
Deprivation, yeah.
There's definitely aspects of that. And I guess depending on, which particular group you're talking about, I mean, if you're talking Māori and Pacifica, we can sort of talk to that a bit more. Obviously, again, if you were, like you said, our previous generations came from Samoa, from the islands, and they were already starting at the bottom. They were doing the cleaning jobs and labor jobs, so the lowest paid jobs. And then to try and advance up, if they didn't have an education, very hard. So they'd stay in those low-skilled, low-paid jobs. So, that's where poverty can sort of manifest. But then obviously, if they've been able to get their kids into good education, and then they've been able to sort of bring them out of poverty as well, that's an opportunity for them to get out of it, but it's not always the case. Again, I guess that's why they have that, they consider economic deprivation, i.e. poverty basically, having to steal to put Kai on the table, for example, as a means of explaining why people offend. But I guess, again, like we said before, if people are in poverty, it's usually because they don't own their own property, or they're not in high-paying jobs, or they don't have that sort of wealth from previous generations. And wealth comes with property rights, land. The Māori had it, and then they lost it. Some of them got it back. They've started to get it back and get assets and resources. And I guess for generations now, where if you're in a position where you can, if you have a good, you got a good education, you have a good job that allows you to buy property or buy assets, some sort of assets, then you're going to set up the next generation much better, as opposed to being where you are now. So, but yeah, I mean, poverty still plays a part. But then that also, I think, in New Zealand, sort of reflects the role of the welfare state as well. And obviously New Zealand, obviously Labour's back in power, and Jacinda Ardern's in there, she's doing her thing. But again, if you sort of look at, I guess, what sort of happened after World War II, and again, like we talked about with the Great Society in America, the role of the welfare state, where you're giving government a lot more power to institute all these programs, actually keeps people in poverty. And that was the big argument with African Americans. And the one thing I have learnt is that when you also take fathers out of the home, when you incentivise mothers to have kids, but they don't need to have a father in the home, they can just basically be married to the state, they're going to have money coming in. But then those children born into those families or households, well, who's their role models? Who's their father figure? Well, they don't have a father figure around telling them not to do stuff. They'll go out and find it out somewhere else. They'll go and find it in gangs. They'll go and find it in crimes. So it's the big thing for me, I mean, being a father, I've got 2 boys. For me, that's the most important job that I have, is to be there for them and to teach them things. That give them the tools to basically navigate life. Because life's tough. Life's going to be tough regardless. You're going to encounter racism. You're going to encounter sexism. You're going to all the isms. As long as it doesn't become socialism or communism, then we're okay. But if not, then yeah, we're going to have problems. So
yeah. I guess also you have outliers as well. Some people who are in poverty but find a way to break through, because they're sometimes struggle is real, and sometimes struggle gives you that sort of drive to push up. So there are those people as well. And I think those kind of people, they don't get much props these days.
Yeah.
And I think some of them we've had on the show, like on our podcast, like talk about that.
Yeah.
How they struggle, and then they don't want to be in that situation anymore, and they just found a way.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that was pretty cool to hear stories of those kind of stories.
Yeah.
The other thing that was cool was sort of like, oh shit, I forgot what I was gonna say. No, I forgot.
All good. Yeah, I guess overcoming adversity, right?
Yeah, that's it.
I mean, it's about sort of resilience. I think that's sort of the buzzword these days, right? Everyone's trying to build resilience.
And that's what I want to ask you, like, is that something that we're born with, or something that's taught, or it's not that. It's because you know how I said some people just
nature,
pull
nurture.
through.
Yeah.
Pull through.
Yeah.
Like where did they get it from? Like,
Yeah, I guess. I mean, if people that argue that it is sort of, some people are naturally orientated that way. It comes from nature. Yeah, maybe they were born, if you can be born with those sorts of genes. A lot of people would probably argue it's more nurture or the environment, because when you are exposed to adversity, you'll either build resilience or you'll fold. You know, and that's where sort of things like suicide can come in and be quite detrimental. I think it's a combination of both. I think everyone needs to go through some sort of adversity, because we are very lucky, especially here in New Zealand, to be born into a place and a time where people that look like us 100 years ago or back, you know, long time ago, would have had problems. You know, and they would have a lot of problems. Today we can walk up and down the street, do what we want, right? But I think everyone, you know, needs to face a bit of adversity, and whatever that is for you, just to build that resilience so you can deal with life and its problems. Because the alternative to that is, you know, drug addiction, alcohol addiction, sort of going the other way, and sadly, suicide. You know, I mean, we've talked a bit about suicide on and that's what I like about all the different podcasts that you guys have as well here at the Wes Network, is because you talk about those sorts of issues. You know, when people get to the point where they don't feel that life is worth living, you know, that's where having people around you, hearing, even just listening to even a conversation like this, might be enough to sort of get them out of it, or get them to go and seek help. You know, go to the different helplines, suicide line, all that sort of stuff, and talk to someone. Because, I mean, suicide is ridiculous. And I guess even with these lockdowns, I mean, I think during the lockdown they said suicides hadn't moved, or was the same, or less than it was last year. And I was like, really? Okay.
I think there's more.
If you say so, because, I mean, you know, I guess depending on where those stats come from. I mean, I heard in Japan, like, there's more people that have died from suicide. I don't know if it's in the last year or even just a particular period. There's more people that have died from suicide than obviously COVID and sort of the usual death occurrences. So stuff's happening because people are, you know, I mean, I wouldn't mind being locked down here. I mean, you've got a nice big screen TV, got the beer fridge, got the sensory deprivation tank over there. The tanning booth's a nice touch. I quite like that one. Get those natural rays coming through. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot of problems going along. There's been a lot of problems with these lockdowns, especially. And I mean, do you think lockdowns have built resilience for people regardless? I mean, what do you think? I mean, you being in lockdown, did that make you a bit more resilient to sort of dealing with life's issues?
I guess we're pretty lucky here, you know.
Yeah.
I think our biggest problem was getting used to no takeaways. But you know, in saying that though, you know how everyone's encouraged to go on walks around the block?
Yeah.
Man, I go walk around the block, right? Like I do it every day, like during the level 4 lockdown.
See the teddy bears?
See the teddy bears?
Yeah.
Man, but like honestly, every day I walk past, like there's like a couple of different houses I walk past.
Yeah.
You can hear the arguments.
Yeah.
The husband and wife arguments.
Yeah. Hey.
I'm thinking, oh man.
So what happens when
these guys can't be locked down.
That's what happens when you don't shut the liquor. That's when liquor stores are considered essential services. Like, that was a bad idea. But yeah, no, and I have to say, in our mahi, in our work as well, a lot of family violence, domestic stuff that we've sort of seen come through. So there's definitely sort of signs there that lockdowns are creating those sorts of social problems.
I remember the government did acknowledge it. They said they're going to, during the lockdown, they acknowledge that there's going to be some.
Well, there'll be more lockdowns probably. if this government's going to continue to have an elimination strategy until the vaccines get here from Pfizer and Moderna. I mean, I think the UK just came out of their lockdown, and they're already distributing the Pfizer vaccine, right? I think they just started yesterday.
That's right.
And they've just locked down California. I mean, we've got family in California, and they're like, what the hell? You want to open all those bloody Hollywood movie production sets, but you want to close down restaurants. Yeah. And yet, you're putting out, catering tents for people to eat outside, but telling restaurants they can't open their restaurants. Are you stupid? That's why people are, sort of revolting or rebelling and stuff. So, it's these lockdowns, bro. And, depending on how far down the rabbit hole you sort of go and sort of what you sort of understand about how they're being used, they make a lot of sense. If you get there, I think it's all about compliance and seeing how willing people are how compliant people are willing to be. Are you willing to wear the mask? Are you willing to keep your social distancing? In New Zealand, we're pretty compliant, right?
Yeah, I see it when I drive past the bus stop. People waiting for the buses with all their masks on. So,
Yeah.
you know, it's not like America when you see them arguing at the supermarket about I have the rights not to wear a mask. Blah blah blah.
Oh, that's because they have, they love their First Amendment, right? They have the Bill of Rights and their Constitution, which basically allows people to have those. I think the First Amendment is, freedom. Freedom of speech and all that sort of stuff, and holding guns. But I guess here in New Zealand, I guess because we're an isolated country at the bottom of the world, we've been able to see what's happened all around the world in terms of lockdowns. But I mean, that's been 9 months of lockdowns, and are cases up or down?
Down.
Or cases here are, around the world, are they up or down?
Some up.
Some up, some down, right?
Yeah.
So it's going to show that, if people are taking lockdown, but cases are going up, well, then obviously the measures, i.e. lockdowns, don't necessarily work. The big thing, I guess, my own personal view on sort of the lockdowns, and this is, so my dad is in a rest home just around the corner, Bupa Tasman Care.
Okay.
They look after him really well. And so he's, obviously very vulnerable. We saw that situation. There was the other rest home just over in Te Atatū that had that outbreak, and then the one down in Christchurch. And 25 odd people in New Zealand dying of coronavirus is very sad. During the lockdown, I mean, it's one thing to sort of message and talk to someone, on Facebook Messenger, whatever it is, but not being able to see him like face to face was very tough, and for him as well, and even the people inside the rest home. I guess what's happened is I think you need to, and a lot of people argue this, is that you need to look after the most vulnerable people in society, and the people that are most susceptible to the disease and will have problems if they encounter the disease, i.e. older people, because that's who the World Health Organization, CDC, Ashley Broomfield here in New Zealand, they said, yep, those people are the most vulnerable. Again, because they might have underlying health conditions, it seems to react worse with them. But then for the rest of the population, kids should be in school, people should be working, and even if they pick up the virus, they're more likely to beat it. So, we have a situation where everyone's having to lock down, everyone's having to wear masks, even after the efficacy of masks haven't even been proven, and lockdowns haven't worked. So why are we still doing them? Because we are compliant, because we'll listen to the government, because they'll tell us what to do and we'll do it. And then you have legislation like the COVID Response Health Bill, which basically needs to be renewed it was supposed to be like a temporary act, right? Responsible. If you notice, every 3 months, cases sort of spring up there so that they can basically keep rolling it over, right? Because the responsible, it's only supposed to be valid for 3 months, and then the government can make a decision whether to extend it. Well, every 3 months, the cases go up. So, no, we need it for another 3 months, another 3 months, another 3 months.
I remember there was some legalities with what they were doing, and they had to word them pretty specific.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if they said the wrong word, it would have been against the law.
Yeah.
So they were real careful with what they were doing.
You got to be careful. I mean, again, if you want to, maintain control of the population, and I'm sure there's people within the government and within the health and the ministry and all that sort of stuff that obviously no one wants to see people die, but at the same time, do you want to see people suffer mental health problems? Do you want to see more people committing suicide, more domestic violence? We're definitely seeing it. People developing drug and alcohol addiction more than they would have if they were able to go to work. I guess that was the thing with us in terms of our work. Because we do video chats, like we didn't stop during lockdown. We weren't essential workers, but we could keep working because we just video chat, and then write our reports that way and then submit them to the court. And then even for sentencing, you could actually zoom in, video chat into the sentencing as well. So, but yeah, I mean, how did you find, because in terms of what do you do for work as well?
I'm an architectural technician.
So
I work in town. So during level 4, we could work from home.
Yeah.
So I was just at home.
Yeah.
But level 3, they put us back in office.
Straight back in the office, right? You guys are essential. Hey, what's this about? Is there like you have to pay $3.40 to go into town? What's some sort of new tax that they're going to bring in for the city? Did you hear about that?
Oh, no, I didn't hear about that.
I saw something.
I thought it was a petrol tax.
I think actually just being inside the city, like they're going to start charging people for actually going into the city. And I thought maybe it was News Hub or something like that. And people were like, hey.
So I'm I'm based in the city, so there's a lot of roadworks going.
Yeah.
They're gonna make Care Road like a 1-lane
Yeah.
street.
Yeah, that sounds about
They're
right.
putting all these bike lanes everywhere.
Yep. Yeah. So people doing away with their cars, and you know, I guess it's all to bring emissions down and all that sort of stuff, and carbon emissions. So I was like, okay, yeah. But yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see sort of, because even in town, 'cause we go to town a bit as well, and you know the speed limits are all reducing. I mean, it's 30 now, 30 or 40, and like you said, all the bike lanes, which is quite cool because you know you can basically jump on a bike or walk all the way from here all the way to town. That's a pretty decent walk. But at the same time, I guess, are you trying to turn the city into a ghost town or just have people there? I mean, what's the plan there? It's
If it was up to me, I'll turn all those car parks buildings into apartments. You know,
Well, they need to fill them, right?
because there will be no cars, so why have those car parks? So
Yeah, true.
I think a good plan would, because they're building the subway system that
Yes.
link
Yeah.
around town, the outskirts of town.
Yep.
So I think if you put apartment buildings all along that link, the outskirts of town, just build them all, make people go into the city rather
Into
than
the-
out.
Like a smart city. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, sort of push people in there. I guess the other issue, I mean, there are a lot of apartments going up, but I think I noticed that there are a lot of student accommodation or student apartments going up. But then obviously with less international students sort of coming or being based here, maybe they'll open those ones up as well to sort of people and make them a bit more affordable and sort of bringing everyone into the city and all that sort of stuff, because otherwise they're just going to sit there. They'll be like those ghost towns in China, those big ghost towns, like thousands of apartments, no one lives there,
Yeah.
just massive developments.
Oh, if you go down Auckland City during the holidays, it's empty.
Yeah.
You know, everyone's gone. Everyone's gone to their bachelors, and
Yeah. Oh, lucky for some, eh? Lucky for some.
everyone's gone down the line up north.
Yep,
You know, so
enjoy that sunshine.
I think just to get people back and get people back into the city. I mean, I think they messed it up when they first took away, when they stopped, or not stopped, but they took away car parks when they made people pay for car parks. So local businesses couldn't have their business there because the customers can't park anywhere.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
And if you remember, I don't know if you remember town back in early 90s, like, you know, Queen Street was like an outdoor mall.
it was.
You know, you walk down Queen Street now, you see $2 shops and banks,
true.
and that's it.
Going to stages and waste
Oh,
a bit of money.
you go into mid-city, what's in there? Well, $2 shops and all
Yeah,
that.
it's all changed, right? Yeah.
So,
Yeah, it's interesting. It's lots of changes. Definitely lots of changes, and changes for obviously infrastructural changes and all that sort of stuff. Changes in education as well, sort of the way that obviously our kids are sort of taught. I mean, how was homeschooling for you fellas?
oh, the kids are good. They just watch the internet.
Nice.
Online.
The Zoom classes and all that
Zoom
sort of
classes
stuff.
and that. So.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to sort of. I did my oldest boy who's here. Yeah, we did homeschooling, which was quite fun. Oh, obviously, sorry, we use a system called Class Dojo, so you could upload work and would have a Zoom class and all that sort of stuff as well. And actually, quite enjoyed it. And even when we went back to school, he was like, "Oh, do I have to go back to school?" I said, "Yeah, you got to go back to school. That way you can get, see your mates again and go on trips and all that sort of stuff." Because he goes to a Christian school, Jira Christian school, just over in Avondale, and so he was like, "Nah, I'm good. No, just stay home and do school at home." I was like, "No, back to school, mate. Enjoy hanging out with people your own age as opposed to us old people."
Yeah.
So, but it'll be interesting to sort of see what happens sort of next year and in the years to come, whether schools continue to adopt sort of some of the changes in regards to using like technology in terms of schooling, because I mean that's a big thing as well. I mean, kids are on devices quite a bit as well, so maybe you might want to limit screen time. You definitely want to limit screen time. But I guess if it can be utilised for people to learn at the same time, because everyone's a different kind of learner, that could be a good thing. But yeah, well, I guess we'll see.
Yeah, it's funny because I remember listening to your episode 21. I think you and Pat were around the fire.
Oh yeah.
Just
We had our Coronas, right? We had our Coronas, and he voted me off the island. I was like, oh, sweet as. Yeah, I think there was maybe one of our rabbit hole.
Wow.
Or reviews, maybe one of our
review
reflection.
episodes,
Reflection or something. Yeah.
But that's probably the first time I wanted to ring in and put my 2 cents in.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I remember you guys were talking about our kids
Yep.
and how we need to educate our kids for the future.
Yep.
And you guys missed out on technology.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big one.
Yeah, that's important.
Because we got our technology podcast. We
Yes, Polytalk,
do.
yeah.
And the Polytech Talk. And it's been recorded here. But I haven't been on it. I've just been helping out. But
Yeah.
man, I've learned so much in that. Man, the only thing I've learned on that one,
Mm.
you got to learn how to use a computer, man. Like,
True. Got a code.
you got to code, man.
You got to learn to code, right? There's definitely a lot more. There's a lot more people encouraging kids to code and learn those different scripting languages. I mean, I did a bit of web design many moons ago as well, and HTML and JavaScript and all that sort of stuff. And it's an interesting sort of thing to get into. But no, definitely. Again, our education system is sort of obviously based more back in sort of the industrial age and sort of getting people in classrooms and learning particular skills. The big thing, and this is someone that's, again, come through the education system. So I'll preface this by saying, look, I've come up through the New Zealand education system. I went into university, studied, got a degree, and then went into lots of different jobs. Maybe because I did sort of social sciences. Maybe that's what I mean. I think if you're going to do like a particular, like architecture or engineering or medical field, have a particular type of skill, it can be a good thing. But if you're sort of not in those STEM fields or those sorts of careers, unless you're willing to take on debt, which is what stuffs everyone up, then yeah, you might want to reconsider whether you want to go down that path, because there are other options out there. That's why you've seen a big push for tradies, right? You see all those ads, it's basically saying the same thing. Why go into debt when you can get a trade and actually make more money than these people that come out with degrees?
Yeah.
And, I think for myself, when I look at my kids, they're 4 and 6 right now, and it doesn't matter to me if they don't end up at university, unless they want to become doctors or something like that, or that's where they need to go and train. But apart from that, there's lots of other options out there, and technology is a big part of that. People developing apps, coming up with all that sort of stuff. That's probably where the future is for a lot of us, or for a lot of people. But I guess the thing with technology as well is the advent of technology, and when you have a lot of technology, it can take away from social interactions. And while this is awesome that we get to speak on a platform like this, a podcast, and have this, what I think is really cool, a long conversation, not scripted, just throwing stuff at each other and sort of seeing if it sticks. For some people, that can isolate them as well. So it might expose them to the ideas, but then they're more prone to just listen to the ideas, as opposed to, I would hope if someone listens to this podcast, they would go away, sit down with a friend and say, oh yeah, I saw those 2 fat guys talking about some stuff. What do you think? Oh no, that one was caca, bro. He didn't even know what he's talking about. Mate, no facts. Facts over feelings, bro. But that's what I mean. Like, there's definitely a lot of advantages to technology, as long as it still encourages some sort of social interaction. Being able to, use the technology, even if it is a video chat, but actually interacting with other people. Because that's the other thing about getting a job, right?
Yeah.
You can have all the qualifications and skills in the world. You don't have people skills. I don't want to hire you. Otherwise, you're going to have to build your own thing and then, sort of bring people in there. So, interpersonal skills is still very important.
Yeah, you're right. You're right about that. I was thinking about one of the guests we've had on the Polytech Talk, Tovia. He said, with kids using his kids when they use devices and stuff, there's a time limit on consuming, but more of a time creating.
Yes.
So you give them programs where they can create things.
Yeah, there's a few out there.
And they can go for gold on that. You can spend as much time as you want because you're creating something.
Until they get sick of it, right? Yeah.
Because you never know what that could lead to.
Yeah, I guess it definitely stimulates the brain in all the right areas. That creativity and sort of. Yeah, I find the same thing with my oldest son who's here. Yeah, I think we've been a bit. There are a couple of. Again, Class Dojo was the school the app that the school gave us for him to use, and he can use that as much as he wants to do like different things and create and all that sort of stuff. But then he likes, oh no, can I watch a movie now? I'm like, well, you can, but you can watch it for like half an hour. Half an hour later, oh, can I keep watching it? And I'm like, oh yeah, go on. So I've got to sort of keep tabs of that, right? Because I like that. It's have all the time you want being creative and building stuff, and then even going away and even trying to build it with blocks or whatever it is. But don't sit there like a vegetable and just consume stuff. Yeah. Otherwise, it's just going to be scrolling and all that sort of stuff. And I think you'll see a lot more and you've already seen them. Like obviously a lot more Polynesian TikTokers and YouTube people and all that sort of stuff. Because I guess we're not a monolith or anything like that, but just we do have an ability to be creative and be engaging and hopefully not too boring to all the listeners out there right now. But yeah, and if you can utilize platforms and the technology, like you said, man, you can definitely have more opportunities, I think, if we're talking education. Utilize those skills and encourage. And as parents, right, we want to encourage that. Yeah, you don't have to. I mean, yep, you can encourage them to go play footy or go play sports because they'll learn about leadership and communication and all that sort of stuff. But I like what you said. Yeah, get them being creative using the technology, but monitor just how much they're just consuming. That's key.
Yeah. Speaking of education, like you've that's been some of your profession over the years, huh? Being an educator.
Yeah.
So you finished Auckland Uni and you did a few jobs, and did you become a teacher or some sort? Because I heard that you went back to uni and did some lecturing.
Yeah, I did, bro. So I did an arts degree. I majored in sociology and minored in film, TV, and media studies, as well as a bit of political studies and even a few women's studies papers, which were quite fun because there were lots of ladies in the class, obviously. The funny thing was, I was considering going into psychology, but I can't count. I failed stats, and you need stats to basically progress through. So I wasn't going to be like, let's go down that road. So I basically did my sociology degree. I finished. I went overseas, played a bit of footy in Australia, became an alcoholic, and I drank too much Victoria Bitter. Any VB guys out there, you probably know what I'm talking about. Basically came back to New Zealand, went back to Auckland Uni and did... It was technically postgrad study, but it was undergraduate because it's called a graduate diploma in arts. So you can be postgraduate in that you've graduated, but you can do undergraduate courses. Does that make sense? And so that's when I picked up Samoan, Te Reo, Pacific dance. We got to dance in Siva and the Whale. We got to learn Samoan. We got to do kapahaka. We got to do all that sort of stuff. I got a lot more. I found my second time around at uni, I got a lot more involved with like Ngā Tauira Māori, like the Māori Students Association, the Asosi. Somehow I ended up the vice president for the Asosi one year, and we took the Sortanga down to Hamilton. That was quite funny. So yeah, definitely that second stint, I guess, that I got to go back to uni, I got a lot more involved with the cultural stuff. And this is me, my early 20s, because I came straight out of school, went to uni. But to come back a few years later, having sort of been over, even if it was just Australia, play a bit of footy, having come back with a little bit of life experience and realising, you know what, I actually need to learn more about Samoan culture, and the best place to start would be starting to learn the language. And so that's what we did there. And it was probably in 2006, 2007. I was part of it's called the Tuakana Arts Program. So Tuakana is an older brother of the same sex sibling. Tuakana Arts Program. I worked alongside Carmel Sepuloni, and she was awesome. I mean, she was, even back then, I was like, you're going to be the first Pacific Island Prime Minister one day, I reckon. And I reckon she still will be. But she used to run the program, and I used to help her with that. And that particular program was basically a pastoral care and academic support program for Māori and Pasifika students in the Faculty of Arts. So if you're in the Faculty of Arts doing any arts papers, we basically had someone like me, and I was only a little bit older than a lot of the students, who could sort of be there in like a pastoral role or refer you on to different support services, or you can come down and sit down or talk to your parents or whatever it was, but also academic support, as in we ran extra tutorials for Māori and Pacific Island students. Now the fun part of that is that a lot of other students were like, well, why do Māori and Pacific Island students get these extra tutorials?
Who's saying that?
The Pālangi students.
Yeah.
Now, the big thing there is, I'm Māori Samoan, but I'm also Danish, Scottish. So, I know what it is to sort of walk in both those worlds. And the funny thing was, when I was in my undergraduate, I used to have fun debates and conversations in our political studies classes because, you'd have a lot of young nats, a lot of conservatives, and I guess at the time I was like probably more left-leaning or Labour supporter, and they'd be like, well, why should we give you guys, why should there be treaty settlements? Why should there be Māori seats in Parliament? All these sorts of questions. And at the time I didn't really know too much. I just said, look, New Zealand is what it is today because of the Treaty of Waitangi. The Crown and Tangata Whenua came together, and we've had this relationship ever since, and that's maybe why you should have Māori seats, so Māoris always have some sort of say in how elections work and all that sort of stuff. And, you know, some people probably back then would have said, oh, well, just being racist, because, you know, you shouldn't prioritise one ethnic group over another. But again, if you look at, if it was a race, if you're saying that Māori and Pacific, as they came in late, are starting back here, and Pālangi or Pākehā people are here, we need ways to sort of catch up. And I guess when it comes to Māori and Pacific Island, I hate to like group Māori and Pacific as a monolith, as in one big group, because we're all different. Within Māori, we're all from different iwis, we have all different dialects, all that different stuff. Pacific, Samoan and Tongan, we have a lot of things in common, but we're also very different in a lot of ways. So these particular, and some of them looked at them as remedial, there were a lot of Māori and Pacific Island students that didn't want to be associated with it. Like we offered this, like, hey, if you'd like to come in, we'll do orientation, we'll go out on camp, a bit like school, you know, 7-form camp, all that sort of stuff, take them away to Waiheke Island, all that sort of stuff, just to create a cohort of, I guess, brown faces, because we were a minority group at uni anyway.
Yeah.
Because where did you study?
I went to Unitec.
Unitec, yeah. So, I mean, I can imagine there, you know, was there a lot of brown faces? What was the sort of...
Actually, it was the most times
Especially
Islands was in my class.
Yeah.
I think there was like, it's about 6 or 7 of us.
Yep.
Yeah,
So
in the same class. And they said that was the most brown faces they've had.
I was going to say, yeah, that's a big number, especially for your sort of area of expertise. So I guess what I found with the Tuakana Arts program, and there's another program I'll talk about a little bit later, the reason why you have programs, and I guess you could call them affirmative action programs, the ones that parallel what was in America, because the government sees a need or sets aside funding, and in this case they call it equity funding. And I think that's important when we're talking about those sorts of programs, is understanding the difference between equality and equity. So equality is what? 50-50, right? Or everyone should be the same. Equity is what's supposed to be fair. So if you have a group that is supposedly disadvantaged, then in order to help bring them up, particular students, then you need to have additional tutorials, for example. The problem with that is it's always going to be a catch-up game, I think. So, right, you know, being a part of that program, what I can foresee in the future, maybe 5 generations or whatever it is from what we're talking about, is you'll have one group that might come up to the level, but then this group here that went part of the equity program will say, well, hang on, we didn't get that sort of funding. Now we're having problems. You know, and if that's the Pākehā or Pālangi people, well, maybe. Because, again, that's the when I think whenever you have, and again, I was a part of it. I worked it. I believed in it. I was happy to work there and support it. But whenever you have any sort of affirmative action or equity programs like that, it can actually cause division and problems. And in some cases, not just actual problems for people that are part of that group that you're trying to help. And the big thing at the University of Auckland is they have an equity opportunities office. And within that group, obviously minority groups, as in Māori, at the time I was there, Māori and Pacific, that's why you had to assign funding. Disabled students, they'd set aside funding for disabled students to help them to also advance. Women, because obviously there's less women at university, I guess, although I think statistically there's probably more, because they depending on what sort of field that you're talking about. So these particular equity initiatives or these particular equity problems, they can be good in some sense, but they can also be detrimental in other senses. They can be good to you, but not necessarily good for you. And I found that a lot of the students that were in our program, they actually suffered a bit of stigma because they were associating them with, for them it was like a remedial program. Oh, you need extra help because you weren't smart enough to get in to university to start with. Sort of things like that. Does that make sense? Was there anything like that at Unitec when you were there, or?
No, there wasn't. There was only there wasn't in terms of like extra help for us. Yeah. No, we just did the same thing everyone else did.
You did the work.
We did the work.
You did the work. Yeah, and achieved. Yeah.
Yeah, there was no exams. We never had no exams or internally assessed. So we just handed our assignments at the end for a mark. But you know the argument between equality and equity. Like for me, it's like, okay, I get the equal opportunity. We're going to make sure everyone gets an equal opportunity.
Equality of opportunity.
To make it. But then sometimes, like say, like for instance, at my work, we've got this guy that came from the government to talk to us about this diversity thing.
Oh, trouble.
And it was like, oh, we need more Pacific Islanders, we need more brown people in the industry.
Yeah.
And I'm like thinking, okay, that's cool. Where are they?
And are they willing to work like you did?
And are they coming out of university doing architecture?
Yeah.
And if they're saying we need more brown faces in your work,
Yeah.
I'm like, oh yeah, but where are they? There's none coming out of university, you know?
Do you need to get more people like yourself into schools to say, hey, look, I'm an architect. You can be an architect like me if you want. Again, it comes down to value, right? So where does sort of our people, again, if we're going to be talking about groups, where do they see value? Do they see value in becoming an architect, or do they see value in becoming something else? That's how you encourage people, by having people like yourself in there. At the same time, are people willing to work that hard? I mean, I can imagine you would have worked that hard, pretty hard to get to where you did.
Yeah, I did. But it's like, why ask the businesses? Why don't you go to schools and ask the primary schools? Are the kids going that way? Are the kids, or are you putting the brown kids in rugby? And are they playing sports more?
Out there playing for your first 15 for 10 years.
You know, are they brown now? Go and play, you guys go play sports because you're good at sports.
Yeah,
you guys go to music because you're good at music. Now you're not encouraged to do chemistry and maths because
STEM fields. You know.
Those kind of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, again, if that's coming at a governmental level, it's because obviously they've been told, oh, you need sort of more brown faces, or you need diversity within your workplace. I guess when it comes to a workplace, do you want diversity? Diversity, or do you want the best people for the job? Now that sort of has a lot of issues around that as well. Do we live in a meritocracy where it's the people that work the hardest and can do the job, get the job? Or is it, do you just want to feel different? Do you want to look diverse and multicultural, whatever you want? And not even just culture, right? It's also, sexual orientation, all that sort of stuff. You need to have X number of gays, X number of transgender, whatever it is. And that's I think that's the big thing with the whole intersectionality of sort of society now, where you have, it's no longer just about, how much melanin you have in your skin. It's not just about where your ethnicity is from. It is about what is your sexual orientation, because you have human resources department that say, well, if you've just got a whole bunch of straight white males here, well, that's not very diverse. I mean, how are you going to encourage people not from that group to get into this particular organisation? So that's where I think a lot of the arguments come in. If you bring in diverse people, maybe that'll bring in other people of that particular group, and then you'll have your diversity. Diversity can be a strength, but diversity at the same time can be quite intolerant if you don't agree with some of the views of the people in those groups. Does that make sense? So I mean, you see a lot of issues now with, again, human resource departments, and probably like the guy that came and spoke to you that says, yep, you need more brown faces here. Again, well, you can tell us that. I mean, are you going to set up programs for us to go into schools and encourage that? Or are you just going to, how do you propose that happens? And then again, that comes back to, again, the education system that we have, is it shaped to do that? Is it happening at primary school, intermediate? Just call it intermediate, primary school, intermediate, high school. Are you getting, that's when they have those career fairs and careers guidance counsellors, and unless you get with those career guidance counsellors say, oh no, just play rugby, bro, you'll be right. No, bro, you're one injury away from being done, and then you have to find something else. So it's and that in New Zealand, it's I mean, you want to see more people achieving in those fields, but people have to want to, I think, achieve in that field. They have to be willing to walk down that path and do the work like you did, or whatever the field is. And people, it's not to say that our people can't. You guys had Lesina on back, and so after I finished my time at Tuakana Arts, I went over to the Faculty of Medical and Health Sciences, and I helped coordinate basically a similar program to Tuakana Arts. It was called MAPAS, and that was the Māori and Pacific Admissions Scheme. That program, it was actually a quota system, a quota program that started back in the 70s. So have you heard of it before?
No.
Oh, okay, cool. So I'll share a bit of information on how it sort of relates to Lesina as well. So the MAPAS program, and again, another equity program, another affirmative action program, because again, you didn't have many Māori and Pacific doctors, nurses, pharmacists, health professionals. And that's one thing, we're still struggling with today, right? You got people like Lesina and a few other people that are coming through. This particular MAPAS program or scheme had been in place during the 70s, from the 70s. And what happened was basically, if you're Māori or Pacific, you know how to become a doctor or get into the medical program, you say you needed an A. They were letting Māori and Pacific Island students that were getting C's or B's into the medical schools or into these programs as well. Now, do you think that's going to cause problems for other people at all?
Yeah,
it is, right? Yeah, it's going to cause some problems. And so that happened for a few years, and some students that came in under that scheme, under that program, were able to finish. I mean, Dr. Elena Curtis, who I worked with in the faculty years later, and she's now the director of that particular program, Vision 2020. She came through that program, and she was able to become a doctor, and then she actually came into the academic field. Now she's an associate professor. But she talked about there were a lot of people that came in with C's, and then they flunked out. They failed because they couldn't handle the 6-7 years of medical school. And so by the time I moved over into the Faculty of Medical and Health Sciences, I was a MAPES coordinator. So I coordinated the program, again, like the Tuakana Arts program, a pastoral care and academic support. So we had the same thing. You basically had a coordinator who could sit down with you. If you're having problems, go and see your MAPES coordinator, which would be me, and I'll sit down and be like, what's wrong with you? And they'll be like, and they'll tell me, and they'll try and help them. And then we had those additional, again, just like in Tuakana Arts, there's additional tutorials specifically for Māori and Pacific Island students. What I found in my time within that program, as well as the Tuakana Arts program, is that not all students are geared up to be university students. People go to university, and in this case, because it's in Auckland, the University of Auckland, they went there because their parents wanted them to go, or they wanted to save face. We had students in those programs that were in there for like 10 years. They would fail and then come back and fail. Whenever you talk about any sort of organisation, you always talk about recruitment and retention of customers, or in this case, students. And so we had, the pass rates for a lot of these Māori and Pacific Island students that were coming through, this is, I'll be specific here, at the University of Auckland, within the Faculty of Arts and within the Faculty of Medical and Health Sciences, was quite bad. And that's because a lot of them were being led into the program with lower grades than what they should have had, that they didn't get a bursary or whatever it was to make it in there. By the time I got in there, and this is where Dr. Elena Curtis was really good, is they started to change. We had an interview process whereby...
So when you got in there, was it still the C to get in?
No, and that's what I'm getting to now.
Okay.
So by the time, and that was the history of it.
Yeah.
And so by the time I got into the MAPES program, they had an interview process. They'd come down to Waipapa, the marae down at the university. They'd sit down with Māori and Pacific academics, and they'd be interviewed by them. And I used to do them as well because I was a coordinator. And we'll try and figure out what's the best pathway for you. What qualifications have you come in with, and what pathway is going to allow you to eventually become what it is you want to become. Most of them want to become doctors. So you might have a student that didn't quite have the grades to get into the medical program straight away, overlapping year one. And so we would recommend them to do, and would say, yeah, you don't have the grades to go straight into the program. You should do the certificate. And then later I ended up tutoring or lecturing sort of thing, on the Certificate in Health Sciences. That was basically a program for Māori and Pacific Island students that didn't go straight into the degree programs. They started at a certificate program. A number of those students have gone through the certificate, gone through the degree, they're out there practicing, they're out there saving our people, which is awesome. But for a lot of them that came through, would recommend the certificate. They didn't want to do it. They're like, no, I'm going to be a doctor, so I need to be in that program. Well, first of all, and we'll take them through testing as well, like numeracy and literacy, bit of an interview process. I think when you have sort of interventions like that and with people that have actually gone through what you're trying to do, if you want to become a doctor, you need to actually listen to people that have gone through that university, that faculty, and become doctors and know what you need to do, and listen to them. And so, again, as I said, a lot of them end up doing the certificate program, and then they got into the degree programs, and then they became health professionals. A lot of them got onto the certificate program, failed that, and realized, oh no, uni's not for me. Yeah. And I think I'm going to go do something else. Some of them went into other faculties within the university. Some went to law, went to arts. Other people just went to other jobs. So I think whenever you have a program, whether it was Tuakana Arts or the MAPES program, you need an interview process or a way to sit down with people before they come in. You don't want to have people come in and set them up to fail. And as I said, Lucina, she was one of the MAPE students. She was one of the really good MAPE students. I think actually she probably would have been able to go straight into the program. She had the grades, and that was the other thing. Sorry, I'm not saying that all the Māori and Pacific Island students that came through the program and came to the interviews and went through the MAPE's program were C students. Some of them were A students. Some of them were B students. Some of them were C students. The ones that tended to be, they obviously worked hard, even if they were C or B students, they were the ones that got through. The ones that were A students, they actually were fine because they already had the work ethic. They already had the education behind them. They had the family support. They had, that a lot of them I found in my time maybe didn't quite have the same cultural identity because they were brought up in Kiwi culture, but a lot of them picked up things being part of the MAPES program and then all that sort of stuff as well. So it's encouraging to see that, a lot of them, when I go into the hospitals now and you sort of see them now as nurses, you see them as pharmacists owning their own pharmacies. You see them as doctors, which is important because it's, one thing to see when you go to the doctor and you see another brown face, you're like, oh, yeah, sweet. It's a bit like when you go to court. When I go to court now, it's like, oh, you see another brown face, like, oh, I'm not the one on trial. Oh, sweet as. I'm not the one that could end up, well, maybe. But when you see another brown face, like you said, when you see another brown face, that will encourage you to move into that space. It's very hard to move into a space if you don't see another brown face or someone that looks like you, unless you really, really, really want to go there. If you don't have the role modeling, whether it's your parents or older siblings, it's very hard to move into a space. But if you really want to move into that space, well, then you, like yourself, you find a way to do it and you get in there. So yeah, it was definitely fun to teach on the certificate, and we talked about Pacific health and Māori health and all the socioeconomic factors, the determinants of health, and why our people again are at the bottom here, and we've got all the worst outcomes for health as well. And that encouraged those particular students even more to study hard, to complete the courses, to complete the degrees, to get out there into the workforce, because we need them. Yeah, we need them. Even if they end up on the Bachelorette or the Bachelor. Why not? Hey, if you can, why not? So wear different hats. It's fun to wear different hats.
Coming back to your I didn't answer your question to me where you said, do I think that you should be qualified, or what was that one? Qualified or to do a job? You have to be more qualified or be equal, sort of thing.
Oh, okay.
Well, me, I would say the most qualified.
Yep.
I think businesses should hire the most qualified. Yeah. Because as a customer, you want the best product or the best service.
Best service, yeah.
And especially the best service, you want the best people to be on it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So why would you want the most qualified? No, and it doesn't matter what
business sense. You want the best people.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. And that's what a meritocracy is, right? The reason why LeBron James dominates the NBA is he's got the genetics, he's got the drive, the work ethic. Anyone that achieves anything in life, they're the most qualified, or they're willing to work the hardest to achieve that. And if you're talking, like you said, a business sense, you want the best. You want to hire an architect that's kaka, and then next minute your building falls over, and then you're liable for people dying and all that sort of stuff. Safety first. So qualifications are important. But again, right now we live in a time where people want to push a narrative that you need to have a representation. I guess the thing is, because the people that have been in power, or the richest people, they've tended to be white males, right? So they're the ones that dominate. And then there's, even despite all of that, there's people like yourself who can still come into those spaces and come into those businesses or organizations and be on par with them as well. But it almost seems like, because there isn't enough variety or diversity, in order to look good for customers or maybe shareholders, or so that people don't think your organization is racist or bigoted, let's get diverse people in. If they're qualified and they can do the job, great. If they're not, well, then we're going to have problems. Otherwise, go ahead and start your own. That's what I mean. If people try and squeeze into boxes or doors, why not just create your own door? Why not just create your own door? And then you can open and close it when you want, and then let other people in. And if you want to have different people come in, then you can do that as well. Our people, we want to encourage each other and plant those seeds. So whatever it is in life that God's called you to do, or you feel that you need to do, pursue it. I mean, there's nothing stopping us, right? I guess when people sort of talk about, there's barriers to entry for business. Yeah, that's usually financial and money-wise, and if you don't have money to invest and all that sort of stuff, you can sort of find, ways to do that. But just, there are barriers for us. We're born into a very lucky time where we can do the things that we want to do. I guess just like yourself, are you willing to work? Are you willing to work and do what you have to?
And that's why I think also technology is important, because these are opening new jobs, new things.
Yeah.
It's also funny to me how there's not more. I wonder why there's not more doctors and lawyers and accountants to help survivors now, because that's one of the main things our parents push for everybody. Like,
yeah.
There's only 3 jobs they push, and that's it.
Oh yeah, my dad was like, "Oh, you go to the university?" Yeah, I'm going to university. What are you going to study? Sociology. Why you want to go and do what? Go be a doctor or a lawyer? I said, well, I don't really want to be honest. I mean, that's not what's going to get me out of bed in the morning. I mean, I was trying to be the dream was play professional rugby overseas and have a plan B or have something to sort of fall back on. But at the same time, sort of go and study something that was interesting. And at the time, I was lucky to sort of get partial scholarships. So, I was like, okay, well, yeah, I'm willing to do that. But yeah, it's definitely still, I would say this, the intrinsic value that's placed on being a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, whatever it is, especially by parents or even people in general, is why people get pushed into those particular careers. But if cleaners got paid as much as doctors, how many people do you think would be cleaners?
Everyone.
I'd be a cleaner. I don't mind cleaning. Hey, that's what Saturdays are for, right?
Don't have to use your brain.
No. Yeah. So again, it's whatever status, I guess, a particular. But I mean, in saying that, I mean, doctors are very important. Without doctors, we're going to have problems. Lawyers, I guess so. But I know a few lawyers, and they're okay. But yeah,
I remember talking to a guy from Romania, and he came over here for work, and he was saying that, when the government feels there's too many of a profession at the country, they'll shut down that school.
Yeah.
I was like, damn, that's a bit harsh.
Yeah. Like I said, I mean, hey, you look around the world and there's some pretty crazy places, and you can see why sort of people will leave their home. They'll leave their homes for better opportunities for themselves, but definitely if they have kids, they'll make the move, just like our previous Pacific Island generations did, come to the land of opportunity. It's interesting now with obviously, Samoan families left Samoa, came to New Zealand. Once they realised Australia was a much better, and get more pay, more sunshine, more like the islands, Australia. And then, a lot of them are now in Europe, a lot of them are in other countries. You go where the opportunity is so that you can, have a good life for yourself and your family. So,
Yeah, it's funny because I looked into moving to Australia.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, actually, that's actually starting from zero again.
It is. Yeah.
Like for all the relationships you made here. But there's always family and friends moving over, so there's enough people over there.
Plenty of them over there.
Plenty of them. But, still, for me, it's like, okay, it'll just be a different place, different environment, more money, but same life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
like, I'm doing exactly the same thing here.
Yeah, why not get paid a bit more for it? That quality of life is important, right? I mean, it's one thing to, and you take your hat off to anyone that's willing to do a job that they hate, just to, they'll get out of bed in the morning, they'll do the job. I mean, we all know plenty of people, how's work? Oh, I hate it. Well, then why do you do it then? Well, I've got to look after myself, got to look after my family, got bills to pay. Okay, well, you can continue to do that, or you can find other ways to sort of bring in other revenue streams, I guess. Start things on the side, and if that develops into something that you can monetize, and like podcasting, for example, then you might be a bit happier, because why go through life, work a job for 40, 50 years or whatever it is, and then come out the other side and say, well, I didn't actually, all you have is the time that you get given. You might as well make use of that time and enjoy life and have a good quality of life. And if you can do that and provide for your family, then happy days. I mean, that's, a lot of people would say that'll be a successful life, so depending on what you want to do, but that's up to you, right? So,
I mean, I've been doing what I'm doing for like 20 years now.
Yeah, bro, that's awesome.
It's sort of like, okay, it's beginning to feel like just a 9 to 5 now. And I sit there at my desk, I'm drawing, and I'm thinking, okay, I should just quit it. But then I think, there'll be worse things than this.
Definitely, yeah. Hey.
So, I think for me, anyway, like, it's more, I value more time now.
Yes.
time. Like I'd rather get time in lieu than get a payout. You know, so I can spend time,
Yeah. Yeah.
my own time. You know, time with family and time doing this. I don't know, but
Yeah.
the more amount it offers, the better now. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. It's I mean, you're very experienced, and I guess it's what I do find interesting, and I guess we've talked a lot this at length probably on our podcast, is how people transition out of either if it's from job to job or career from school to university, whatever it is. Life is full of transitions, and how successfully you transition out of one thing into another will determine that quality of life that you have. And I mean, a lot of the people that we've spoken to, and even my own personal experience, having transitioned from, say, being a professional rugby player to then going back to whatever a normal life is, it can be a tough transition because all of a sudden you go from doing something that you did as a kid, you loved it, you'd run around bare feet and play in the backyard and all that sort of stuff. You end up getting paid for it, and people see enough value that they will pay you to put on a jersey and put on some boots and run around a rugby field. And then I guess because there is a limited shelf life with that, you can't play rugby forever. So you need a plan B, or you need to transition out of that once you're done. Some people will stay in the industry, for example, become coaches or that sort of stuff. But then what are the other options? I think if you're a professional rugby player, and this is what I've gotten from whether it was a Ronnie or Caleb or whoever it was sort of sharing, Ronnie wanted to make sure, and Sir Michael as well, that stuff that they did, rugby was a part of their journey, but it wasn't the only part. So obviously they're strong men of faith, they were part of their communities, they looked after their aingas, but they had other things on the side. They did other businesses, they got other qualifications, and then that's allowed them to still be part of that rugby circle, but then transition out of it quite easily. Because a lot of people, like a lot of guys I've played with, after they were sort of done professionally, they got quite depressed. Because there's one thing to go from, it's a bit like being in prison, or the schedule, the safety, rugby season, okay, off season, I get training, I play in season, hopefully I don't get too many injuries, and then I go again, I run out in front of the crowds, I sign autographs, I get these deals if you're like high professional, and for all of that to disappear, they're like, well, doesn't anyone want my autograph anymore? Doesn't anyone want to sort of clap when I run it in the field? And then you have health issues. That's why I quite thought, did you watch the Match Fit show?
I didn't watch it, but a lot of people were talking about it, and I was listening.
Good
and
concept.
It's good. Yeah, good concept. Yeah,
great concept.
And I heard what was happening, and it was pretty cool. The stories everyone was talking about.
Yeah.
Ron Cribb.
Story.
And stuff like that. It was pretty cool.
So, I mean, that's the thing, right? Those were guys who were All Blacks. They were at the top, the best rugby players in the world. But you don't play rugby forever. And one thing that will happen when you transition out of professional sport, or professional rugby in this case, is that you got to keep on top of your health. And that's one thing that I found. I mean, to be honest with you, if I was still overseas, I'd still be playing. I mean, if my dad hadn't lost his leg, I'd probably still be overseas playing, even in my 40s, because physically I feel okay. I mean, people ask me, you had a bit of a rugby career. I was like, well, I wouldn't say, I had a semi-professional rugby career, and then I got paid to play. I got to get to play in the UK and all over the world and stuff like that. But I wasn't the highest level. I didn't play. I got to play international rugby as well, which was a buzz, be it tier 3, tier 4. But was I ever good enough to be an All Black, or did I ever have that desire to be an All Black or wear the Manu Samoa jersey? I mean, that would have been cool. To be honest, when I look at the guys that I played with and against around that time, no, because the other guys were so much better. The Tony Woodcocks, the Carl Haymans, the John Affords. I'd be like, I got no chance.
What team was that?
So I sort of came up, I played a lot of Auckland Rep rugby. So, I went to Mount Russell Grammar.
Yeah.
We played B grade. I never played A grade rugby. When I left school, I went to Marist, I went to Teachers Eastern, came through the Auckland system, Auckland Schoolboys, Auckland 19s. I was in the Blues development, I think 2000, I want to say. And that was sort of my first taste of semi-professional rugby, as in getting paid, being part of the Auckland development squad. So I was part of the system. Yeah. But again, when I look at the guys I was playing with and against, like I put my coach's hat on now, I said, bro, I would have chosen you. Those other guys worked way harder. They were stronger. They listened. They didn't think they were so cool. And so that's what I mean. So I'm grateful that I got to play against those sorts of guys and test yourself. But no, I was never good enough to reach that level. But even for someone like me to not reach that level, to still be able to go overseas and play rugby, to get paid to play rugby, to travel the world.
So that was in, you went to Sydney first?
Yes, I played for a team called the Gold Coast Breakers.
Cool.
So they was semi-professional. They played in the Brisbane comp. So this is around 2000. And here I am, this 21-year-old, heading over to this club. And I thought, to be honest, when I look back, I was quite arrogant because I was like, I play for Auckland, bro. Like, you get over there, you play against these Aussies, bro, it's getting messed up. And that's when I developed a bit of a drinking problem. And and I find those are the stories when I share those stories. They're like, but you've had plenty of opportunities, but you didn't. You could have stayed and played. I mean, Ty McIsaac, who played for the Wallabies, he was our hooker, and a few other guys. Wendell Saylor was part of that club as well. And like you had opportunity, but you didn't use them. And so I have no regrets in terms of my career because I got given plenty of opportunities to, I guess, make it, but I just wasn't good enough at the time. I accepted that, but I still wanted to play overseas. So I came back to New Zealand, started playing topside again. I ended up at Waitakere City, just here, playing a bit, but Auckland Samoa stuff, Samoa and all that sort of stuff. I went over to the UK, came back. That's when I started teaching in the MAPAS program, and then even a bit of time in France, which was fun. And then I ended up in Asia, sort of 6-7 years ago. Here I was, 32 years old, still wanting to play rugby, where most guys, if they're not broken, sort of pack it in. I'm like, oh no, I'd actually like to see Asia, and so that's why I went to Hong Kong. 3 years later, I was playing for the Hong Kong rugby union team. It's like, oh, who's this guy? It doesn't look very sanga to me. And then a couple of years later, playing for the Hong Kong Rugby League team. And that's why I was telling you about our podcast we used to do before. Again, but not at like the top level, not tier 1, but sort of tier 3, tier 4, semi-professional. But having that opportunity to do that, even if it's, people can find fulfillment in that, I guess is what I'm getting at. So even if, if you don't make it to the very top or make the big mega bucks where you can then buy properties and buy investments and come out of rugby the other end successful and not too much brain CT, not too much brain damage. That's one path. But then I think there's a lot of guys out there, and girls, because a lot more women are going overseas and playing as well. There's other avenues. And that's why I encourage anyone that, once all these bubbles open up again, if they ever open up again, if you get an opportunity, even if it's not, you can do it for rugby, but other opportunities to do an OE, get overseas, go and live in a different country, experience different cultures, try different food, some good food all around the world. So end up fat, but when I look back on my rugby career, I'm like, when I used to play with Joey and Roger and them as well, and they would school me. They used to school me, so there you go. That should tell you enough. But when you get given opportunities, at the time, if you're mature enough and can stay injury free, you can make the most of them. And if you don't, well, then you just find other opportunities to take advantage of and see how else you can use the gifts God has given you to sort of do stuff, but also help people. So,
since we started our podcast and they had all these different guests and talking about their journeys and their success, I've sort of touched on it before, but it sort of made me look at my life, what I did, and I think, man, I've done nothing, But then, I'm thinking like I could have done more, and then I think, okay, so it's this sort of place for me to to listen to their stories and listen to your story. And how you're saying opportunity, like, and then I think of my kids, the kids upstairs, and I think, okay, I think the best thing is to show them everything while they're young.
Yeah, bro.
So show them all these doors that they can open sometime, but as long as it's there.
Yeah.
Like, don't force them into whatever you want them to be. But no one ever knows what they're going to be.
No.
What your kids are going to be. You just need to give them opportunity to show everything.
Expose them to stuff.
And try to find a way to get out of that repetitive life.
Yeah.
Like, we're talking about having a 9-to-5 job forever.
Yeah.
Same thing every day.
Yeah. Unless you really love it.
Unless you really love it. But you might love it for the first 10 years.
Yeah.
But we lived to what? 50 years?
Well, our life expectancy is going up. So,
Is going up. So... And I remember reading this book about I don't know if you read Yuval Harari. He wrote *Sapiens*.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And he wrote *Homo Deus*.
Yep.
So the book *Homo Deus* is about humans in the future, what he thinks, and
True.
He gives all these facts and talks about it. He said, if technology advances humans, that they can live to 150.
Yep.
there's all these different sets of problems now. You're really gonna live to 150. You're really gonna have the same job to 150, and the way technology is changing, you're really gonna upskill.
Biohacking and all that transhumanism.
So you're gonna upskill every 10 years.
Yeah. I guess that comes down to whether we still have the same sort of economies that we have now, and whether it's, do we develop enough technology where people don't necessarily need to work more hours or as many hours, and I guess that's where sort of government comes into play. And if you sort of look at sort of if you have enough technology where people don't have to work as much, bills are paid for, you can still choose to work in different parts of the community, then you won't have to sort of transition out of that. That sort of reminded me of an episode of it was Joe Rogan. They're talking about the grey aliens that people have seen, are those just humans from the future? Because by then their brains are so big, because they're just using all the technology. They don't really use their muscles anymore. They just they're telepathic. Maybe they have the Elon Musk Neuralink. Are those the humans from the future? Oh, maybe. The little skinny with big heads. Oh, who knows? Yeah, it could be. Yeah.
But that thing. Oh, sorry, I went off track with the future thing. Okay. But just to with the kids, like just try open them up to opportunity, but to not live that repetitive life. I think that's the main. I think that's the goal. That's a lifestyle. In a nutshell, that should be a goal. Because depression. I mean, if you hate your job, I mean, sooner or later you're going to be.
We've all done jobs. Yeah. Find fulfillment in whatever it is you do, and how you spend your time, and who you spend it with. If you have an opportunity to do something that brings you that purpose or that fulfillment, it makes you money, and which is going to help you to then spend as much time as you need with the people that matter most to you. And for us, that's our partners, that's our family, that's parents, that's all we can encourage our kids to do. So it's a good way to do it.
So these are the things I think about, from the podcast. And how about you and Pat? Like, have you found doing the podcast from episode 1 to where we are now, the evolution of it? Have you felt was there a point where I don't know, might be episode 20 that, oh man, this is the direction we should go. It's becoming something. It's evolving into this.
Yeah.
We're going into this direction now. We never thought about it before when we started, but I think we found our place now.
It's definitely evolved. I mean, it's quite fluid because, like you fellas, I mean, we're pretty this isn't scripted. Like, this is just us people sharing their thoughts. What I did find interesting is obviously we started and it was just me and Pat. And then we started getting guests in and friends of ours or people that we knew. When we started to get people in that had, I guess, a profile or celebrity or higher profile, sort of people that are known in the community or within the country or even overseas, I found that our format of the show actually shifted more towards an interview type podcast, whereas we'd ask a question and then they'd answer. And we'd ask a question, which is more sort of your traditional media, as opposed to when it's probably just me and Pat, like we're doing now, just going sort of back and forth. And he likes to go down the rabbit hole. He likes to put his tinfoil hat on, and I don't mind engaging in that as well. So I think, when we brought people on who have a bit of a profile, it turned into more of an interview process. Whether it stays that way, we'll see. But what I found, and that's what I like about what you guys do, is that it's actually when the video camera stops rolling and the microphones are off, that's when you really get down to the nitty-gritty. That's when you actually people actually open up a lot more, and they actually share better stories.
But that shouldn't be the goal, right?
No, it's not.
That shouldn't be the goal.
No, I'm like, and every time after, I'm like, oh man, if only he was willing to share that. That's the stuff that you actually want people to hear.
Exactly.
Because of, where people's positions. I mean, a couple of our guests, again, because they're high-profile people, they'll ask for questions, or they'll have media people say, "Oh, what are your questions going to be?" And we've had to change some questions because they don't want to talk about particular things. That sort of changed it because they're like, "Oh, well, we don't really have questions. We kind of just have a conversation." "Oh no, what are your questions?" so that we can okay them.
Oh, really?
I'm like, "Oh, okay, big brother, big tech. Oh, all right, Zuckerberg. All right, whatever." That's not. So that's been sort of the change for us. And again, when it's just me and him, we can we can go down the rabbit hole. When we have other people come in, we have to be mindful of their status in the community, because you don't want to get them in trouble. But I tell you what, once that camera's off, bro, they're going down exactly the same rabbit holes as us. They have the same opinions, and they have much funnier stories. So it's like, okay, I mean, it's cool that we got to capture that. Will we get to a point down the line where we can capture more of those sort of natural stories? Yeah, maybe. But if not, again, whenever we bring people in, we just want them to be comfortable. And whenever someone comes in, I'm always like, it's a conversation, bro. So throw stuff back at us. Like, a bit of banter. Yeah. We love a bit of banter. Although, us polys, sometimes the banter turns into fists. But, just a bit of a chat. Have a chat. But I have to say, of late, most of our... And I don't mind it in that format. I'm not saying it's not a good thing, because, like you said, when you've got someone that's achieved some great success, I mean, these are heroes for a lot of people. That's what you want to come across. Not me jumping in and chucking something out of left field at them. It's like, well, no one wants to hear from you, mate. We want to hear from that person. So I'm like, that's definitely taught us to be a lot more, to listen a lot more actively, and then just sit there and and fanboy out, I guess, in some cases. But just listen, because that's the other part of conversation, right? And I think it's important whenever you do, you got to show that you're actively listening to someone by bringing up their points again. Like, don't just throw questions at people. Just, you said this before. Try and bring it back into the conversation. Because then it shows both of us are engaging and learning. I see Art of War up there. That's very impressive, brother. Sun Tzu, that's cool. I like the books, mate. He's got a great collection.
Thanks.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah. No, all those things you said is exactly what happens with us too, our experience too. Except for the we haven't had anyone to tell us what to say.
Oh, true.
Or tell what questions to ask. But one thing I do find, what I think, or I have this fear that we'll get a high profile guest and he'll be like thinking after half an hour, he'll be thinking, what am I here for? You're not even talking about me. We're talking about what's going on. Yeah. But that's whole...
The format of the show.
The format.
How you want it to sort of come across.
Yeah. Because I noticed that with some of Joe Rogan stuff. And I don't know if it's because they're celebrities and they already know each other's. But when they talk, they just talk about what's happening now.
Yes.
Like what's happening around them.
Yeah.
So I find that's pretty cool.
I think we have an opportunity. I remember when we did... around the time of the measles outbreak in Samoa. And so we started, I think early on in our shows like that, we started looking sort of back at a bit of historical stuff. So, the Spanish flu in Samoa back in 1918, we started, and then we started talking about Samoan independence and bringing all that stuff in as well, because it's an opportunity to talk about something that's happening right now, but relate it back to and talk about the history of that as well.
Yes.
And so I thought that was quite important. It's so little things like that I think can be important to bring into conversations, but getting that right balance of getting enough when you have guests, enough of what they want to have come across, I guess, or what you think people will benefit from out there from listening to them will get, but also just different things as well. We learn from history, right? We're products of history and all that sort of stuff. And if you can relate it to something that's happening right now, it brings a bit more nuance to the conversation. And that's what you want. You want a bit more nuance, a bit more detail for that conversation to be worth someone's time. I mean, for someone to sit down for an hour and a half, 2 hours and listen to you speak, I mean, who are we? They're like, who are these random guys? But people are willing to do that, right? They will sit down and listen because they're like, oh, yeah, he thinks a lot of the same things I think. Oh, I didn't know that stuff. Let's go fact check it and see if he's actually telling the truth or he's being caca.
Oh, we encourage fact checking, but that's one of the things I like about you guys' podcast is that you've had guests on that are relevant for now. Like you've had your friend that came on talking about he got COVID from the Maris.
Yes, yeah.
From the Fear Night, at the Maris.
Yeah. That was crazy.
What was that of it?
I was conveniently absent from that one. Pat said,
it was Pat's mate, though.
Pat. Yeah. So it was, but yeah, I mean, just to get an insight, because I mean, he was saying like the media were hounding him when he first got it, and he's like, oh no, he posted some stuff online, but just it's when you can again, I guess, sort of do the job of, and again, we're basically new media, right? or alternative media, all the different slogans as opposed to mainstream media. So we have an opportunity, because we have the technology and because we don't have the same, I guess, commercial imperatives that mainstream media have. You can sort of go into sort of the stories that are most relevant. And if you have that connection, then that makes it even easier. But I mean, in terms of our, like, guess, like Pat's the one that reaches out. I mean, you know, we know people and we approach people and we can jump on Zoom or whatever it is. But I mean, if someone says no, it's cool. Yeah, you just move on. It's like sales. The more no's you get, the more yeses you'll eventually get. So it's like, yeah, you just ask someone else, and people aren't. The timing's not right. Sweet. You sort of ask other people. But yeah, it's an interesting, I guess, when we again, because I studied media. That was the one thing, sorry, I will say about what I got out of studying media at university. And you talked about it in terms of shining that light. That's what media is supposed to be. The democratic role of the media, and this is what we learned, this is one of the few things I remember from studying, is that it's the media's job to give people information so they can make the most informed decisions, whether it's politics or things that are happening in that society. When you have narratives that are being pushed in certain directions, that changes where that spotlight, like you said, goes, that's all people will be aware of, and then they're not making the most informed decisions. So, again, when you have alternative media like we're doing here, yeah, there's no regulation and I guess fact checking and all that sort of stuff, although if it's on Facebook, it will get fact checked, so that's always interesting. You can sort of see how, I think in a lot of ways, sort of mainstream media is starting to sort of die, starting to disappear, and alternative media, more people. I mean, I'm sure statistically, you'd have to look up the stats, will get their news from social media, and again, that highlights the role of big tech and the sort of role they play. All those big tech oligarchs, like Mark Zuckerberg and who's the guy that does Twitter? Sorry, what's his name? I've forgotten the guy that does Twitter. But I mean, you think about it, that's where people are forming their opinions. That's where they're forming, and that's where they're then going and making, at the ballot box or whatever it is, or they're going out and protesting. Wherever that light used to be just the mainstream media, I think you have two lights now. You have one light shining here, one light shining here. Will they ever become one light again? I don't know, because everyone has different opinions and different views. And again, it depends on what narratives are being pushed.
Well, that big tech as well, the advertising going to now. That's why they're using all the data they collect too.
Big data is huge.
Yeah.
That's funnily how it's. I've heard this so many times on other podcasts that only drug dealers and social media call their clients users. We're users. Everyone else is, a consumer or. So it's yeah, and again, harvesting all that data. We had Nico Faleono, who does. It was interesting to talk to him because he's basically part of big data. So his company, they specialize in sort of marketing and collecting big data, and then getting that to companies so they can use that data, or the ethics, which we sort of got into, for them to basically target their marketing. That's all it is. It's a bit like, what's that movie? It's a Minority Report with Tom Cruise. Minority Report, when he sort of wears the glasses and the particular adverts come in. Yep. You see it on social media anyway. You're scrolling through and then you mention All Blacks, and next thing you know, an All Black ad pops up. Obviously Big Tech is listening, Big Brother's listening, and they want to market directly to you. That's what Social Dilemma was, right?
Dilemma, yeah.
What do you think of that, bro? Because that was funny.
Well, it was kind of, for me when I watched it, it was kind of, okay, yeah, you sort of knew it, but it's good to see it in detail, right? Yeah. It's good to see exactly what's going on, and it's sort of it's cool to see the original engineers of the algorithm come on, talk about it, and say, I can't believe we've invented this.
What the hell? Technology, being used not so much for good.
Yeah,
and like you said, that's the thing with technology.
And I heard you and Pat talk about it too, and you guys are right. Like we live in a time where we don't know what's going on. We just go with it. And the consequences, we don't know what they are, but we just slowly dealing with the consequences as they come. Oh.
Yeah. I mean, I guess where people get their information from is very important, but how people think is more important, which is where things like critical thinking come into play, where and critical thinking is just, if someone presents information to you, you can look at it and be critical about it. Or you can critique it or sort of break it down. Like, okay, this is the information, okay. And then someone else might come along with information that's contrary to that. You want to be able to look at both sets of information and then say, oh, well, this makes more sense than this, or I agree more with this, therefore I'm going to go with that. People talk about sort of truth, speaking their truth. You hear that a lot. It's like, well, you should speak the truth. I mean, I can understand if you're saying your truth, but then there's the truth, depending on what we're talking about. Your ability to have, and that's where I think things like this are very important. You need to sit down and have long conversations with people, you probably agree with on a lot of things, but also disagree with. Because when you, like a debate or even a discussion, if you talk to people that have different opinions, like I talked about before with that Mo Fax and Adam Curry podcast, you got two different people sitting down and talking and understanding each other and learning, and that way you're either gonna solidify your perspective on something, or you're gonna soften it. Because you're like, oh no, actually this thing makes sense here. Does that make sense? So you want to engage in long conversations.
Yeah.
To
sort it out. Because there is a problem.
If there's problems, bro,
you need
definitely.
to sort it out.
Yeah.
You need to unpack everything and see what it is,
Lean
and
into it,
and let's come to a
some
decision
sort of
based
consensus,
on what we can talk about.
What do they say when they're polite? Let's agree to disagree. Like, okay, as long as we don't punch each other in the face, that's all good.
But I think that disagree, or let's agree to disagree, is what happens when you have your own truth.
Yeah, that's true.
For me, having my own truth is that's it's good to have your own truth, but you have to be open to change if something else makes sense to you. Because everything's going to make sense if it's your truth, right?
Yeah.
Because your truth is you making sense
your
of
lived
something.
experience,
and you making sense of something. But if something else comes that makes even more sense, then hey, you got to be lenient to.
You can chop and change, right? You can evolve or develop. I mean, think about those Puma players that said something racist 10 years ago. These like as teenagers. Yeah, you can say dumb things when you're a teenager, but retroactively, is that the term? Being punished for it now? It's like, really?
Well, that's cancel culture, right? So
cancel culture.
Pablo Matera. So he said that stuff when he was 18 at the time, touring South Africa.
Yeah.
But then you've been in the court system and all that, so working there, so cancel culture doesn't allow for rehabilitation or learning from your mistakes. You said something 10 years ago, now that's it, you're out.
Yeah, that's the...
Oh, it doesn't matter what kind of person you are now. Did you learn from your mistakes? I don't know, but I don't care. You're out.
Yeah. Especially us males, right? I mean, human brain, they reckon, doesn't develop until your mid-20s. We're in our 40s. I don't know about you, bro, but my brain's still a bit more. So, mistakes you make in the past, if you're remorseful for them, or you learn, more importantly, you learn from them, then you have a chance to evolve. But like you said, when you have cancel culture, that will try and look... And now, with everyone's lives online, people will go back and find stuff and bring that up, especially if you're in like political office and stuff. What I find interesting is the way, and again, if we're talking technology, have you seen those deep fake videos? Where they put the faces, so they have, I guess it's CGI based, where they can basically, and there's even apps that I've seen on Facebook which has the same thing, where they can impose someone else's face on your face, or impose it on like a character. And even, I think Joe Rogan talked about it, even like voice recognition, or voice data, where they can get all this online, you speaking online, for example, put it into a database, and then basically have you say anything. And so you can imagine.
So you can get framed.
You can get framed, right? Right. It's Minority Report, basically. If we're thinking about it that way. Yeah, I have to find those twins. So.
But you know how I say about technology. I mean, if Pablo Matera said that 10 years ago, technology was new. No one knows what the platform was doing back then.
Oh, mate, it's just going to continue to evolve.
Now we know what a platform does.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we can go back 10 years when no one didn't know and pick everything everyone said.
Yeah. So do you reckon AI sort of runs everything, bro? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, hopefully AI is used to benefit humans, not to take over us.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the right...
Hopefully not an Ultron out there.
That's the right thing to...
Pulling those strings, yeah.
But coming back to the podcast and the long form conversation, like you're right with what you see in radio and TV, like you don't get that anywhere else. I mean, it's all sound bites. You know, you're just there to answer the question, and that's it. I mean, you can't go deep into conversation like how we do on the podcast. I think how it's accessed, podcast access is important too. Like, it's not like you jump on YouTube and sit down for 3 hours and watch a conversation. You know, podcast you can put in your ear. You can go for a run.
Check your earbuds in, and then you're off.
Put in your car.
Yep.
Be stuck in traffic for an hour. You can listen to a whole hour.
Yeah, true. Especially on that northwestern.
You know, so I think I don't. Do you and Pat find that it's that sort of access to podcasts still new in New Zealand?
Yeah, I think it's a lot more common now. And I think, again, I mean, we both use Anchor, right? So, I mean, I like how Anchor has made it a lot easier for people to distribute their podcasts across all the main podcast platforms, which means whether you get it from Google Podcasts or Apple or iTunes or Spotify, it's definitely a lot more accessible. But the best part of that is that it makes it easier for people to jump into the podcasting game. I think if you're going to jump into a podcast, though, you've got to have some sort of plan, or at least some sort of, like you said, sort of direction that you want to go in, and you can let it evolve and chop and change and wherever you eventually want it to go. But just these long forms of conversation, these long conversations that you have, they can then be used basically by anyone that sort of follows you to then help solidify people's own beliefs or maybe their truth. And then that way they can sort of go away. I mean, I would hope that my experience with podcasts is I will listen to a podcast and then I will, go away and start a conversation with someone about it or about that topic. I find the best, I go to Westwave on probably a Wednesday and a Friday morning, and it's always there's always these older Samoan people and Palangis and Māoris, and they all sort of sit in the hydrotherapy pool and they have their discussions and their debates, and they've started to let me in. They come and join the conversation, and I'll chuck a seed out there, or elections or whatever it is, and then they'll go to town and everyone will have their opinion, but it's just good dialogue. Just good discourses, good discussions, and and they'll all go away, and some of them will get angry and say, kaka, what are you talking about? And then they'll come back the next day and they'll do it all again. And again, it's when you can bring those ideas, you can bring ideas into play and flesh them out a bit and understand them but then to hear them from other people's perspectives, I guess is what I'm saying. To hear it from older generations, it's like, oh wow, I didn't think of it that way, because I'm looking at it from here. You're looking at it from here, you're looking at it from here. We can all sort of, if we all have a bit more of a 360 view of whatever it is we're talking about, it's a little bit more detailed, a bit more nuanced, it actually makes a bit more sense now. And maybe that's what makes you a bit more tolerant to understanding other people's views. Because to change someone's belief system's almost near impossible, unless you're God, and then, people get saved and stuff. But otherwise, people will be stuck in their beliefs, even if they're presented with X number of facts. Even if the cases are made, if someone believes if their belief system is in place, it's solidified and doesn't seem to break, then people are going to stick to that belief, whatever it is, whether it's religion or politics or whatever. So,
I remember hearing Jordan Peterson talk about how people have. He learned for his podcast that his millions of views he's got for his podcast, even his YouTube, he's learned that people have a hunger for knowledge. People have a hunger for listening to ideas. And for him, it's he said it's shocking to him that he can't believe it. And I think that goes to that. That's all for the long form conversation and podcast. People want to hear stuff.
They want to be exposed.
They want to hear opinions, different opinions.
Yeah. I mean, that's the one thing about hearing a debate. Like I remember, I think he debate. Was it Sam Harris? Sam Harris and those sort of debates, and then they'll sort of sit down and atheism and all that sort of stuff. I guess the big thing with Jordan Peterson as well is that I quite like that he does his podcast with his daughter, and Michaela Peterson, and she's gone through a bit. I was just yesterday actually, I was listening to their interview with Wim Hof, because obviously Jordan Peterson's had quite a number of health issues.
He's the breathing guy.
Yeah.
I was thinking, is that what the All Blacks do? And the Warriors do the breathing exercise?
Yeah, probably. just to get the body alkaline and all that sort of stuff. I mean, but again, someone like that, he understands the importance of utilising different platforms to get the information out there that he's trying to get out. And that's, about, self-responsibility and all that sort of stuff. And I quite like his self-authoring tool that he has online. Have
you tried it?
I've had a look at it. Yep. So again, because I'm lazy, I was like, oh, that sounds cool. I think I'll just listen to his podcast and 12 Rules for Life and chuck in a couple myself. But yeah, it looks good. It looks like a good resource to basically, if you feel that, even if you don't feel that way, if you feel like you need a bit of direction in your life, then it's a good tool to use. Because again, a lot of people might come from, like I said, broken homes or fatherless homes, where you all, didn't go through the same education system or have those skills, or have some sort of trauma where they need to find ways to deal with things. His work is interesting because he does talk about sort of, conscientiousness and agreeableness in terms of sort of the workplace. If you're more conscientious, you're more likely to be, to do the work, to get in there and get it done. If you're more agreeable, you're less likely to argue for a raise. So what would you rather be? You kind of got to get the right balance, right? Otherwise, you'll be stuck, like you said, in that 9-to-5 job, 10 years down the track. You're like, what am I doing here? What am I doing here? I've got to do something else. And then have the courage to do something else. So he's got some good stuff. Cool. Is that us?
That's us, man.
That's us, bro. Wow. Hey, the sun's gone. The sunbed stopped.
So, what's coming up with you and Pat on the podcast before Christmas? Are you guys wrapping up for Christmas, or? Yeah,
I think. Again, that's all up to the boss. He'll sort of let me know when if we'll do another one before Christmas, and then we'll probably get back up in the new year, bringing more guests in, and again just sitting down and having these probably not as long as this conversation. If people have nodded off, but definitely having longer conversations, and again just sharing stories. And if people find them inspiring and inspired by the people we bring on, or even topics that we talk about, that's all what it's about. And definitely for us, it's been fun to be able to do it. But I think more importantly now, connect with other podcasters like you fellas that are in the same space and collaborating. Because at the end of the day, we can, together with our powers combined, like Captain Planet, I'm sure we can, heart. I'm sure we can get a lot more information out there and just encouraging other people to have conversations, talking. Just sit down and talk to someone.
Most definitely. Oh, I have one last question. How are you guys finding the different platforms? Because you guys are on YouTube and Facebook. Yeah, so Paddy puts so we'll shoot it as well, like we're doing now, and then Patrick will edit, because he edits it, being the creative person that he is. He likes to chuck in his cutaways and his images and his video footage as well, which is quite cool, but it's time consuming. And then he'll basically put it on our Facebook, or on his Facebook page, DNRIP Productions, and then he's got basically a playlist of all our episodes. He does upload them to YouTube as well, but like I said, some of them have been blocked because we like I said, is it because of the music? So probably sometimes for the music, probably sometimes for some of the content. Really? Yeah. Maybe some of the COVID stuff that we've sort of got into. Oh, really? Yeah. What? Yeah, a bit weird. Well, that's what he reckons. Okay, bro, either way they're listening, bro, so don't worry. Just whatever content we can get out. And then I basically go away myself and I get the audio and I check it up on Anchor, and then Anchor distributes it all to the different different platforms. So, it's not that time consuming, more so for him. But I guess, again, because it's a conversation which isn't scripted and it's just people chatting together, I just turn up and talk. So, like we've done today, which has been really awesome to do. We have to come back again when our other halves are here to defend themselves. And, Exactly. No, that's a bet, man. You and Pat, come back. Yeah, we'll see Isaiah. It'll be cool. Have some fun. Yeah, awesome. Definitely. Hey, man, good luck and Merry Christmas. Awesome. Happy holidays. Love it. Glad to be here. Thank you, Uzo. Thanks, Uzo.